Steve, in your book True Legends, you talk about a Smithsonian cover-up whenever giant bones are involved. So I want to ask you the question that everybody always asks. Where are all the giant bones?
It's interesting, Tim, because of the bias of the Smithsonian and their contempt for out-of-place artifacts. Every time giants were found, it didn't matter if it was on the West Coast, the Arctic, the Antarctic, believe it or not, the East Coast, the Ohio River mounds, they always have a fabulous cutoff point, meaning once the Smithsonian is notified, and those bones are sent to the Smithsonian, they're never heard from again. And there's denials. A good example of that, it was a famous Kincaid expedition to the Grand Canyon, where they found the Egyptian citadel. Even the Phoenix Gazette carried that story. So, Tim, the cover-up has always been to keep this biblically relevant topic out of the minds of the people, so at an appropriate time in the future, they can claim whatever they want to claim, and they'll claim anything and everything apart from the true biblical origin of giants.
So Steve, even during World War II, there were reports of giants and cannibalism coming out of the Solomon Islands. What was that all about?
After World War II, people couldn't reconcile the fact that a lot of servicemen, U.S. servicemen, had been eaten, cannibalized, as well as Japanese. And the fascinating investigation I've come up with was the fact that the Solomon Islands are riddled with stories of cannibalistic giants and even living giants to this day. I was contacted by a man named Marius who was literally going to meet me in California with, let's just say this, irrefutable evidence. But he said to me on the phone, he said, Steve, I'm being followed, and I'm not sure I'll even make it there alive. What has to be asked, the question that needs to be asked and has to be asked, is that why do people who have the evidence, why are they intimidated? Why are they threatened? Why are they disappeared? What is this cover-up? And I'll tell you the bottom line, they do not want people to understand that the sons of God, the fallen angels, saw that the daughters of earth were fair, mated with them, and produced a literally new race of hybrid beings that the Bible calls the Rephaim. And the Rephaim are with us today. They're genetic trace, they're genetic markers. And when we get into super soldiers, Tim, the super soldiers, the most important expenditures made are to identify not only the bloodline, but the genetic traits. There are people literally not only wanting to bring the giants back, but to insert giant genes in our soldiers to give them the super soldier ability. More money is being spent to identify genetic traces and markers, the actual gene prints of giants, both dead and extractable DNA from their teeth, from whatever cells in the mummies, to literally living giants today.
So in other words, what you're saying is somebody's trying to weaponize giant genes.
Absolutely. And the Super Soldier program is probably one of the most almost unbelievable, yet so believable programs that the U.S. military is involved in. And all the underground labs, all the secret places around the planet, everybody's after the same thing. They want comic book heroes that we would only laugh about and have laughed about maybe for 50 years, and now it's no longer fantasy, it's fact.
And we're not just talking about superhuman strength, are we? We're also talking about superhuman cerebral capabilities that the giants had.
Absolutely. Speaking of cerebral capabilities, the giants, even when they're in a stasis state, that means in suspended animation, whether it's Dr. Ernest Muldashev in Russia, in the mountains of Tibet, whether it's a whole underground base in which some of these entities, these living giants, are present, they have so much cerebral energy that they actually have what's called the red line. And you can't go past that, or literally, they claim, according to special operations, 4-star generals, that literally it causes a person to almost come apart at the seams. It not only drives people mad, but it literally just causes them to go to pieces. You understand that's the ultimate weapon. You know, Michael Crichton with Jurassic Park brought us dinosaurs, and now we're hearing about woolly mammoths being cloned, and we're hearing all these news stories that Neanderthal is no longer a member of our family tree, which I've said for 30 years. But the point being is that it's all about weapons. And as a general said to me in special operations, it doesn't matter if it's ancient technology, doesn't matter if it's ancient genetics, those of us are either fighting to keep it out of the hands of the wrong people, or the wrong people are fighting us to kill us to get it into their hands. There's a war going on, and it's no longer just dusty old bones in a museum stuck away.
So, Steve, according to Genesis 6, fallen angels had sexual relations with human women, creating these hybrid half-angel, half-human giants. In a weaponized, military weaponized sense, what other capabilities might these super soldiers have if they have the genes of giants?
Well, beyond the obvious of strength, beyond the obvious of almost supervision, super hearing, one of the most remarkable things from my four-star general friend was basically said they hunt by DNA. Every person's DNA has a specific harmonic that they could identify a specific target's DNA and assign a Fido, the 19-foot giant, to go after. And it was interesting because when you think about it, even going back to Jack the Giant Killer and Jack Be Nimble, Jack Be Quick, as I've been researching all these, remember the statement? Fee, fi, fo, fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman. You go to the Bible, and whose blood cried out? Righteous Abel blood cried out to the living God after Cain slew him. So the harmonics of blood is fascinating. That's why the cry of the innocent blood is such a big deal in God's eyes, and it truly is, because the blood has a signal, a frequency, and there have been studies to prove that. So they want the giants to be able to basically target specific DNA characteristics. Not to mention the bottom line, and you know how much I love to say that, these entities want every last human being destroyed, and in its place a hybrid. They're going to try and prove that God's a liar. Jesus himself said if the days weren't shortened, there'd be no flesh left alive, yet for the elect's sake, those days will be shortened.
You've turned down opportunities to work with some of the major networks on documentaries concerning giants. Why have you decided not to work with them? And furthermore, why have you decided to start your own production company, Gen 6 Productions?
Tim, it's just simply this. I believe the big lie that's going to be hoisted upon the world is that the aliens created mankind, which I categorically reject. It's funny, the people that will accept the fact that the Anunnaki, star creatures, came to this planet will avoid fallen angels like a plague. I wanted the correct, in my opinion, after 40 years of research, I wanted the correct historic and biblical presentation of the giants. And quite candidly, when I talk to some of them, if I start talking about fallen angels having sex with earth women, they snicker. Well, that snicker tells me they've already made up their mind. And I said, I will only appear on camera if I can have final edit of what I say. Guess what? Nobody wanted to do that. That tells me there's agenda. So I believe this is a time that you and I are going to basically go out and say to the world, okay, here's what those guys are saying, but here's not only what the Bible says, and here's how accurate the Bible is with the history that follows. Gen 6 Productions is totally different than everything else that's on the TV, everything else that's on the documentary. Everybody's looking in a rear-view mirror at history, just trying to find the bones and find the original documents of all of the different finds, and I've spent 20 years doing that already. But we're taking people, Tim, simply where no one else has ever gone before. They're starting from the premise that all the giants are gone. We're starting from the premise that there are modern-day giants now who aren't suffering from acromegaly or some pituitary disorder, but they're literally going to fulfill the biblical statement of Matthew 24, where Jesus said, just as in the days of Noah, so would it be in the days of the coming of the Son of Man. Most people do not understand the evil. Most people can't even embrace the fact that this isn't about old bones. This is about a contemporary threat beyond any science fiction twisting of the facts, And that's why we're going to, I believe the best antidote, that's why we're going to do this thing, Gen 6 Productions. We're going to present information. We're going to present eyewitness testimony. Again, we're not just dealing with bones. Obviously, we'll follow the leads of bones, but we're going to show the people out there what the truth is and why this cover-up has been a multi-thousand-year cover-up, and what the expectation that everyone is going to, not only the expectation, but what is going to be presented to the people as the gods who made us. And I got to share this. When I did write the book True Legends, Genesis 6 Giants, Aliens and Fallen Angels, Angel Wars, everything I've written is to this point where Jesus said, if the days weren't shortened for the elect's sake, there'd be no flesh left alive. And the genetic tampering, the genetic destruction, the designs of the Luciferian globalists to destroy every human being on the planet, to insert their new creation, that we'll call him the Uberman, Nietzsche's statement, the Superman. What it's going to be is a super slaughter. And by giving people the correct information, by literally telling them what the end of the book is, how this plays out in history, my goal is to take away all fear and show them that the truth will make them free as long as they abide in the word of the Lord and the word of the Lord abides in them. Too many people are making too many excuses for the living God, and I'm looking for that time when the people of God will stand up, when the people of God will not take a back seat to the skeptic, who's the only agenda he has is what he's being paid to say. We're going to produce, I would say, such a different documentary form and style that I think people will be really excited, and especially to get involved with the Synod.
In other words, rather than looking for the giants that were, we're looking for the giants that are.
Absolutely. And I find it fascinating. Just as we're literally in the time of the movie of Noah, which was just a disaster biblically, it wasn't even anywhere near the scripture, but the times of Noah, isn't it interesting? The times of Noah, and now we got all this interest in giants. Hello, I don't think God could give a bigger neon sign than if he wrote it in the sky. And I'm not taking liberty, but even as everything is lining up, we are in the days of Noah. In the Noah days, there were giants in the land. And now we're having Hollywood just come out with movie after movie after movie, trying to denigrate biblical Moses, it doesn't matter if it's Noah, trying to distort true history so they can insert their own history. For instance, in the movie Noah, this is pretty fascinating. Most people don't know this. The fallen angels are the good guys, and Noah's the bad guy.
No, they're called the Watchers, aren't they?
Yes, they are. They're called the Watchers. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think what we're going to do is be able to give you a compressed, truly a compressed understanding of history that when I say mind-blowing, it'll also be heart-freeing. It will help you to understand the headlines, the movies, and the ultimate plan and scheme for your destruction. But the good news is, Jesus said he'd never leave us nor forsake us. And I believe that, Tim, we're at that time in history now. We're in the days of Noah, and everything that preceded Noah building the ark and the judgment of Almighty God on this earth that was in rebellion is about to be relived.
what I want to talk about tonight, there's basically two paradigms that we can hold on to when we look at ufology. The first one is they're extraterrestrial. They come from the Pleiades. They come from Zeta Reticuli or wherever, the planet Zubo. And a lot of people hold on to that paradigm. And what we're going to do is we're going to have 10 quotes from people who basically hold to the extraterrestrial paradigm. And then we'll have 10 quotes from people, some of them you may know, who hold to the interdimensional paradigm. And of course, the two are really sort of at loggerheads. And let me just preface it by saying this. What if we're in a holographic universe? Seriously. What if reality is what we think is reality really isn't reality? In other words, it really is some sort of a matrix. And the reason why, thank you, Evangelist. How's that, any better? Well, thank you very much. Okay, so think about this. The craft materialize, they shapeshift, they morph. People who are abducted go through windows, through doorways, through ceilings, entry wounds. There are no entry wounds where the implants are. The implants just are there. Linda Moulton Howe some years ago talked about a cattle mutilation, 1,500-pound steer, where the heart was taken out of the... This is much better, thank you. I can see you. The heart was taken out of the pericardium without an incision. How is that possible? What we're looking at, as Dr. David Jacobs, and I'm sure most of you know, is a future physics. In other words, whatever's going on here, the rules that we work under, it doesn't apply. And I think we all, floating through the window, are you kidding me? Come on, think about it. But what's interesting is a lot of the ancient prophetic texts talk about the same thing, the same type of what we would call paranormal, because it is paranormal. It certainly isn't normal. Walking through a wall is not normal. Appearing in a jail cell is not normal. Walking on the water is not. All these things are certainly not normal. So we've got two paradigms: the extraterrestrial, they're from millions of light years away, whatever, and the interdimensional, that somehow they're from another dimension, and they pop in and they pop out. The whole point of this is you got to decide which one you're going to embrace, and hopefully I will be able to influence you on this particular paradigm that I embrace. But let's move on. Here are some quotes. We have no proof. This is from Neil Armstrong, not UFOs. We have no proof, but if we extrapolate based on the best information we have available to us, we have to come to the conclusion that other life probably exists out there and perhaps in many places. Astronaut Gordon Cooper. The evidence points to the fact that Roswell was a real event and that indeed an alien craft did crash, and that material was recovered from the crash site. Seth Mitchell, who became the sixth man on the moon in the Apollo 14 mission. Mitchell doesn't say he's seen a UFO, but he says he's met with high-ranking military officers who admitted involvement with alien technology and hardware. Cooper told a UN committee recently, every day in the USA, our radar instruments capture objects of form and composition unknown to us. Cooper speculates that public skepticism towards UFOs will shift dramatically. Commander Eugene Cernan. I've been asked about UFOs, and I said publicly I thought they were somebody else's, some other civilization. Admiral Roscoe, Hillenkoetter, director. Unknown objects are operating under intelligent control, and it is imperative that we learn where UFOs come from and what their purpose is. Look, folks, one thing I know we can agree on, and I use this in my books, UFOs are real, burgeoning, and not going away. And I know everybody in this room pretty much will hold on to that paradigm. So we're already in agreement. They're real, they're burgeoning, they're increasing in number. UFO sightings are exponential right now. And it's not going away. I mean, this is why France and England, Germany, France, Germany, Japan, Belgium, Peru, Mexico, the Vatican, all have acknowledged that the UFO phenomenon is real. So the United States is the only, sort of the gorilla in the room that won't basically cop to it and say, okay, something's going on. Instead we get, well, Bob, those little green men are back again. Now, cut out to some reporter someplace. That's right, Steve, and last night, the McGillicuddies saw this strange object in the sky. And they always yuck it up. And, if you say anything to and you guys, I'm sure, have experienced this, you say something to your family members, you get the wide-eyed look, and people start stepping backwards, that kind of thing. But the phenomenon is real. I've seen two myself. One, when I was a Boy Scout, 12 years old, we're walking up a ravine, and I can go to the place today. It's at a Boy Scout camp, Camp Horseshoe, Rising Sun, Maryland. We're walking up this ravine, and there's like 4 of us in single file. We're hopping over these rocks, dry creek bed. The guy goes, wow, what's that? The other two guys go, whoa, what is that? And I go, where? And they go, there. We're all facing, we're walking this way. All of a sudden we face this way, we're pointing up. Go, oh my gosh. Now, you know the old trick, take your thumb, stand it up, and put it out in front of you. How big was the saucer, right? And it's a great way to go. What I saw was a metallic disc in a beautiful spring or fall day. I don't know when it was, 12 years old. But there was not a cloud in the sky, and this metallic craft just sat there, completely noiseless, the sun glinting off of it. We're all just blown away by what we saw. We saw it for maybe 15 seconds, classic UFO departure, shoot straight up in the air and gone. You could follow it with your eye, but I mean, it was gone in a matter of just a flash. We go running back to Boy Scout camp. We saw a flying saucer. We saw a flying saucer, because UFO really wasn't used in 1962 so much. Flying saucer was in the vernacular. Flying saucer was in the lexicon. So we go running back. The whole crowd of kids around us, and you know the scoutmasters are there, and we're telling them what we saw. By the evening meal, the other three guys denied that they had ever seen anything. Because of what? Because of the ridicule. It was my first lesson about herd mentality, that people will go along with the herd, you know, not to be ostracized. And I was called UFO boy or flying saucer boy the rest of the weekend. I didn't care. There's no way I was going to back out what I saw. The other one we saw fairly recently, my wife and I, about 8 years ago. We're driving up Pacific Coast Highway after a nice big spaghetti dinner, and she's driving, I'm in the passenger seat, and she goes, wow, what is that? We're driving north on PCH by Zuma Beach. And I go, wow, what is that? It's kind of like that light, right, which is shining in my eyes. But very, very bright. And I'm going, wow, it's very strange if it's an airplane. And we're looking at it. She's driving, and I'm looking at it. And all of a sudden, it's like, here is the, I'm already down a rabbit trail, and I'm on slide 6. We'll never get done. Here's the object like this. All of a sudden, it was like, boom! A bright light appears in front of it, slowly descends into the large object, and then the object breaks apart in concentric rings. All this is in our first Watchers episode. And I just went, oh, we're not in Kansas anymore. Are you kidding me? I mean, what's going on? And all of a sudden, bam, and the thing's back. It's like, whoa, what's going on here? We pull over to the side of the road, we watch the same thing happen like 2 or 3 times. You know, we're just mesmerized, literally, by what we had seen. So let's move on. Giorgio Tsoukalos. The only way the ancient astronaut theory can be disproven is when they show up. That's a direct quote. I'm not sure what he means by that. I don't think Giorgio knows what he means by that. We're half extraterrestrial and half human. We're hybrids. This is Giorgio's worldview, and he's entitled to it. And he may be right. General Douglas MacArthur, the nations of the world will have to unite, for the next war will be an interplanetary war. The nations of the earth must someday make a common front against attack by people from other planets. Air Chief Marshal Dowding, thank you. Of course the flying saucers are real, and they are interplanetary. So he's down and jiggy with that. If I could use an expression from the 90s. Now we flip the page. Hence the yellow ink. This is from Dr. Jacques Vallée, one of the founding fathers of ufology. I think we can all agree on that. Human beings are under the control of a strange force that bends them in absurd ways, forcing them to play a role in a bizarre game of deception. Terence McKenna, we are part of a symbiotic relationship with something which disguises itself as an extraterrestrial invasion so as not to alarm us. Gordon Crichton, there seems to be no evidence yet that any of these craft or beings originate from outer space. Lynn Cato, a large part of the available UFO literature is closely linked with mysticism and the metaphysical. It deals with subjects like mental telepathy, automatic writing, and invisible entities, as well as phenomena like poltergeist manifestations and possession. Many of the UFO reports now being published in the popular press recount alleged incidents that are strikingly similar to demonic possession and psychic phenomena. Dr. Pierre Guérin, UFO behavior is more akin to magic than to physics as we know it. The modern UFO-nauts and the demons of the past days are probably identical. John A. Keel, great researcher. The UFO manifestations seem to be, by and large, merely minor variations of the age-old demonological phenomenon. Whitley Strieber, and I love this quote. When I read this, I was reading Communion years ago, and whoa, it just blew me out of the room. I became entirely given over to extreme dread. The fear was so powerful that it seemed to make my personality completely evaporate. Remember, this is in the early days. Whitley ceased to exist. What was left was a body in a state of raw fear, so great that it swept about me like a thick, suffocating curtain, turning paralysis into a condition that seemed close to death. I died, and a wild animal appeared in my place. I have experienced similar, that remote, that unbelievable extreme dread. I'll just give you a little hint. Sometimes when I'm around, which is rare, this doesn't happen like every week, but it does happen. I don't go looking for it, but when it comes my way, I will engage it. And normally, if a person is possessed by what we would call a demon, sometimes they can choke you, they can cloud your mind so thick, the fear can be so great. There's a way out of that, but that's what they hit you with. They're not punching you, they're hitting you with this psychic wave of fear, and it's extremely debilitating, especially at 3 in the morning. Dr. Jacques Vallée. The symbolic display seen by the abductees is identical to the type of initiation ritual or astral voyage that is embedded in the occult traditions of every culture. Book I'm working on deals with all this. It'll be out in 2016. The structure of abduction stories is identical to that of occult initiation rituals. The UFO beings of today belong to the same class of manifestations as the occult entities that were described in centuries past. G.H. Pemmer, if you have not read this book, Earth's Earliest Ages, it is a fantastic read. He wrote this thing, I think, in like 1850. It's an amazing book. The Occultist, and the reason why I have it here is because it basically tag teams with Dr. Jacques Vallée. Listen to what Pember says. The Occultist is brought into intelligent communication with the spirits of the air and can receive any knowledge which they possess, or any false impression they choose to impart. The demons seem permitted to do various wonders at their request. First of all, we need to understand what a demon is. Okay? A demon, in my opinion, is the disembodied spirits, you heard it from Steve, of the Nephilim. The Nephilim, according to ancient texts which are out there, the Nephilim are the unholy progeny of these entities from another interdimension. I'll just leave it at that, because if I say what they are, you'll immediately just go, whoa, because you've been programmed to do that, most of you, and that's okay. But they are nefarious entities from another dimension that come and mate with the women, and the hybrid being that then manifests is called the Nephilim. They were on the earth thousands of years ago. You'll see some signs that we've uncovered, literally, of the so-called Nephilim giants here in the Americas. This happened probably about 3,000 years ago. Of course, we can't do carbon dating on some of these artifacts. Other artifacts, which I'll show you later, we are in the process of attempting to get permission to do carbon dating and DNA testing. And the results, I think, will be fascinating. The bottom line is, out on Catalina, I discovered 2 9-footers. That's not normal. 2 9-footers out on Catalina Island. And I'll show you that in just a little bit. You'll have to wait. Okay.
Although as Minister of National Defense, I had sighting reports.
Let me go
UFO.
back. Let me go back. This is Paul Hellyer, who is the former Defense Secretary. Canadian Government Defense Secretary. He's the former defense head, okay? This guy led the Defense Department of the Canadian government. This isn't some guy with a 4th grade education and a 6-pack of beer out in a canoe someplace. This guy, I mean, this is heavy stuff. And this, of course, is at the this UFO disclosure thing in Washington several years back. We helped Stephen Bassett actually do some of the editing. Richard Shaw did that. The bottom line is, listen to what he talks about. And I mean, I'll sort of do a spoiler here. He basically says UFOs were as real as the airplanes flying overhead. Once again, we all agree on that. I'm sure if I were to ask how many people have had an encounter, most of the hands in this room would go up. But I digress. Listen to what Mr. Hellyer has to say.
Although as Minister of National Defense, I had sighting reports of UFOs. I was too busy to be concerned about them at the time because I was trying to unify the Army, Navy, and Air Force into a single Canadian Defense Force. And that itself was a kind of battle to the finish. So this was not high on my agenda. But about 10 years ago, I started getting interested due to a young man from Ottawa sending me material on the subject. I told him I was too busy to read it, but he had confidence that someday I would. It took me a while to get around to reading it, but I took it for my summer reading in 2005 and was really impressed with what was contained in it. And what I thought to myself is there are huge issues here, huge issues. And the American people and the people of the world have a right to know what's going on, because they're part of it. It's not just an isolated thing. I accept the invitation of Victor Vigiani, who's over here somewhere, and his cohort, Mike Bird, to speak to a symposium at the University of Toronto. And I said, UFOs are as real as the airplanes flying overhead.
Now, what's amazing about this is that statement got a lot of traction. And since that statement several years back, Hellier has gone on numerous news media, Fox News, CNN. I mean, he's made the rounds. And they ask him, and this is what I would term soft disclosure. What I mean by that is they throw this stuff up, and the American people, for the most part, just yawn. And, watch the game, take the six-pack out of the refrigerator, have a big pork roast, whatever they're doing. But they're completely asleep at the wheel for the most part. They don't care. And so they lob these softballs across on the media. I mean, here's Paul Hellier. This is like groundbreaking stuff, and nobody cares. I mean, are they spraying something in the sky that's making everybody docile without what's going on? I mean, it's like, where's the outrage? Why aren't we storming the Bastille demanding the truth? We're not. I mean, you guys are in this room. You guys are interested in this stuff. You want to know the truth. I want to know the truth. I want to know what the heck's going on. And don't give me this stuff, it's all, it's real. It's not swamp gas. It's not weather balloons caught in a flock of geese reflecting the planet Venus in a cloud of swamp gas. That's not what we're looking at here. This stuff is real, and we know it's real. We're going to talk about with Robert Salas and what happened to him. Robert Salas, sorry. This way. There we go. Robert Salas was on a ballistic missile base at this commander in 1967 when a red UFO landed near the front gate and disabled all 10 missiles. By the way, this interview is just riveting. I sat down with Robert Salas and interviewed him at some Watcher 7 physical evidence. And I interview for people for a living. This is what I do. I'm constantly talking to people and asking the question and then waiting 5 minutes and asking the same question again, slightly different, just to see what the reaction. Watching their body language, watching to see where their eyes go, if they shift their weight, if they fold their arms like this, if they cross. You learn all these things as you go, and I've learned them. And I really watch people's body language. This guy was like, he was emotional. He really was emotional as he talked about what he saw in 1967 at the Malmstrom Air Force Base. But what really got him is when we interviewed Salas, the first time he ever came on tape with his story about being abducted, we broke the story, which is just groundbreaking. And he was very, very emotional when he talked about what happened. And that's where we're going with this thing. So, Later, other bases had the same thing happen with various witnesses, including Captain Bradford Runyon, who saw the ship from his B-52 bomber. It was also plotted on radar. Later, he read a report that a 20-ton missile silo lid had been removed and placed on the ground during the UFO intrusion. We don't know how many bases had the same thing happen, but it was more than one. Years later, Salas was abducted, and we're going to get into that. Remember the 20-ton blast lid. That's really important because the craft just picked this thing up like it was nothing. And what's interesting is, this is in modernity. Salas's abduction is in modernity. What happened in the ancient past, and I might have time to touch on a little bit, in places like Sacsayhuaman, where we've got 120-ton stones, polygonal shape, put together perfectly. The stones of Baalbek, which weigh, the two new ones that they just found recently, weigh about 1,800 tons. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? How do you move stuff like this and why? The stones of Sacsayhuaman, going back to Peru again, ancient megalithic stones. And remember, all the Inca had were llamas? How do you move a 120-ton stone 2,000 feet lower, 40 miles away in a quarry? How do you do that? And if they did all this, where's the technology? Why haven't the archaeologists found any tools? There's nothing. There's nothing there. Copper chisels, you can't cut andesite stone with a copper chisel. You can't do it. And all the stones in Sacsayhuaman are andesite. On the Mohs hardness together 7. A diamond is 10. So here you are with a little copper chisel. Tink, tink, tink. Done. Over. And these things are so perfect. The stones are fitted so perfectly well together. I have come to call it Nephilim architecture. That's my label for it, because that's the paradigm that I embrace. So Salas is laying in bed with his wife. This is years now after he had an encounter with the UFO. All of a sudden, this blue mist starts coming. You know, it's just right out of a Spielberg movie, classic stuff. The door, you know, the light's on the other side of the door. The blue mist comes in. He realizes he's paralyzed. He sees two hooded figures. He sits up in bed. His wife has been switched off, which is normal. He then is levitated above the bed, which to him is like, and like to any of you in the room who have had that happen, it's like, you know, wait a minute, what's going on? And see, this is my point. We are dealing with entities which can manipulate space, time, energy, and matter in ways that we don't know how. And what's interesting is when we look at these ancient prophetic texts, that's exactly what we see happening in these ancient prophetic texts. Whoever these guys are that are popping in and out are manipulating time, space, energy, and matter in ways that we don't understand. I'll get to that in a little bit. He's then floated to the window, and Dr. Jacobs' quote is incredible. That's also in Watcher 7. And Jacob, you know, he's been doing this for 35 years, so he sort of laughs at it. But there was a period of time where he wouldn't be laughing. He can laugh at it now because he's grown accustomed to it. When I read Jacob's books, you know, The Threat, I would read like 4 pages ago, I can't read anymore. This is just way too freaky. I can't read anymore. Because I knew it was real. And, it, you know, when you read this stuff, it just bends your head. It bends your whole paradigm. And because we almost have cognitive dissonance to it. Because there's nothing to base it on. It's like, oh my gosh, the phenomenon is real. These people are being abducted. They are being implanted. They're being floated through the window. And of course, what Jacob says is that pretty much everybody that he regresses has the same thing. They get close to the window and they go, the window's locked. How am I going to get through the window? And they find themselves going through the window. When they sit with Jacobs, they go, has anyone else ever reported that? And what they don't understand is everyone that Dr. Jacobs has spoken to reports the same thing. It's either the window or the wall or the ceiling. Bill, who we interviewed in Watchers 7 and 8, and he had an implant. He was abducted when he was 5 years old. He had the implant for 40 years. We'll get to that in a little bit. But he talked about it. The first time they appeared in his room, he fought them off. Second time, right up through the ceiling. And he remembered his pajamas flapping because they went up so fast. Found himself on the steel table. A lot of it's a blank. 40 years later, the implant was acting up. But I digress. I'm moving ahead. We'll talk about Bill in a little bit. So here's Salas headed towards the window. And that's a different physics, folks. You can say whatever you want. There's no way. How did they do it? How do they put him through the window? And he finds himself on the table with one of these guys looking at him with a very, very long needle. And he's wide awake, but he can't move. And they stick it in his malehood. They insert that needle up through his penis, and, you know, it's excruciating. They know exactly what they're doing. He's terrified, so what else is new? And from where I'm coming from, there's a story, and I want to tell you the story. Because just like Salas, an intruder, there's this guy called Peter. He's in a jail cell 2,000 years ago, all right? He's in a jail cell. Chained to a wall. There's a bunch of other people in the jail cell. They're Roman guards walking up and down. This is from 2,000 years ago, this story, okay? And I believe it's true. All of a sudden, this intruder, but it's a good guy, pops through the wall. Time out. How's that happen? How does he come through the wall? And he goes, Peter, stand up and get your things. Peter's mind is fogged. He's not sure whether he's awake or asleep. He's like in a stupor kind of thing. He looks over, all of a sudden his chains just fall off of him. He realizes that his cellmates are asleep. You know, they're like switched off. All of a sudden the jail cell door opens by itself. Peter walks out. The Roman guards are also asleep. Classic. They had been literally switched off. Now in Rome, if you were a Roman soldier and you worked in a prison and somebody escaped, you fell on your sword in the morning. If you were a Roman soldier and you fell asleep on your post, you fell on your sword. And that's what kept you from going to sleep. Because you knew if you got caught, you fall on your sword. I mean, that's what they would do. That's how brutal they were. So Peter walks down the aisle with this intruder from another dimension. The prison door opens up. They're out in the courtyard. These huge gates open up by themselves. Peter is set free. And this messenger, because that's what he was, a messenger, and I believe he was benevolent, basically just disappears. What does that sound like to you? Except it's a good thing. In other words, could it possibly be that there were two sides to the coin? That one group, the group that abducted Salas, are highly malevolent, and the other guys who set Peter free are highly benevolent. They're good, but they're the same entities. But we'll get into that. So this is Chase Klotsky. Oops. We're down in Peru with Chase. The way she came on board with this, our Peruvian exhibition was just incredible. It was just providential. And she's incredible in the field. I can't speak highly enough about her. She's just amazing. But she came on camera. This is all in Watchers 8, I believe. And she comes on camera with us and tells us for the first time, it's just like Salas. I guess people trust us. I don't know why. But they do, and they tell their stories to us. And, you know, Chase was approached by networks and all this other stuff, and what she was afraid of is that, just like Salas, that they would edit it or twist it and whatever, and that we promised both Salas and Chase, that we wouldn't edit it in any way. We would just tell the story. In fact, Salas, he made us sign an agreement saying that he would have first right of refusal. Let me get a slurp. And we did. We showed him the edited piece, and he said, great, run with it. There was no, well, I don't like that. It was fair, and it was good, and it favored him, and we didn't cut anything or make him look stupid or anything else. I mean, it was just a real straight-up interview, and that's what we did with Chase. Listen to what she talks about. She's in a field with a bunch of other UFO researchers, and the encounter she has is absolutely chilling. Listen to it.
Extremely overwhelming to have something like this right there, and there's nothing you can do to record it. All of a sudden there was just this feeling, and I turned around and kind of asked everybody else in the field if they felt like they were being watched. Okay. And I said, and I don't mean from up there, I mean from down here. And before anyone could answer, and there was barely any time, there was this fear that just gripped. It was physical, LA. It like punches into you almost. It's just really hard to describe.
I'm very familiar with that feeling.
This is not fight or flight. This is times 1,000. This is every single cell in your body is very aware of a blind terror. I dropped my equipment. I literally dropped my equipment.
Equipment's worth how many thousands of dollars?
Many thousands.
So you leave your equipment in the field.
Yes.
So you are genuinely terrified.
Absolutely. The witness was in front of me, and all of a sudden he stopped. He moved his flashlight, and never so shocked in my life, because standing 6 feet away was this little being about 3.5 foot tall. And I was so stunned. And the first thing that hit me was, oh my gosh, this is not that cute little Roswell alien. However, it was gray. It did have the black eyes, but they weren't the real big, wrap around almond, but they were almond shaped. And the first thing I thought of after that was his legs were so tiny, twig-like. There it is right there, and it was the Holy Grail for a ufologist is this little being, but we weren't supposed to be there. We were not supposed to interact. We were not supposed to do anything to get out of that corner.
What expression did it have on its face?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Absolutely.
Did it gesture towards you in any way?
No.
Did it move towards you?
Nothing.
It just stood there. And you made eye contact with it?
Yes. Yes.
What was that like?
Terrifying.
Terrifying.
Basically, the bottom line is she was terrified. And this is what I hear over and over again from pretty much everyone I've talked to. Now, not everyone. There are some people that experience, and these entities who come and get them and do put things in their body seem to be benevolent. But that's a 3-hour discussion. We don't have time for it. Is the supernatural manifesting now? So, from an interdimensional point of view, I'm going to show you something that happened in Cairo in 2009. Of course, you didn't see this on CNN or Fox or anything else. But this happened in Cairo. It has been vetted numerous times. There was an apparition that appeared over a Coptic church, basically for days on end, without ceasing. And the mayor of the town was so freaked out about it that he made sure that all the electricity was turned off, so no one could be hoaxing this thing. What you'll see, unlike you see today over there, are Muslims and Christians together clapping in the square in front of this Coptic church and watching the apparition. The apparition is basically 4 balls of light. Now they will say it's Mary and Jesus, the angel Gabriel, and Joseph. Nonsense. It's 4 blobs of light. That's all it is. And in other words, it appears over the church. the reason why I show it to you, everyone in the square is embracing this thing. And that's what you'll see. They're all clapping and whooping it up, and there's the apparition. Guys selling falafels. Can't see the apparition without buying a falafel. I mean, watch it. It's unbelievable. And the reason why I show it wherever I go is because this is what people do when they see stuff. They're just mesmerized. Cognitive dissonance. They have nothing in their paradigm to relate to. There's nothing there. They're overwhelmed by the experience. Same thing happened in Fatima in 1917. I wrote about that extensively. Interviewed many people, went back and did the diligence, going back into the records, into the newspapers, and finding out what the witnesses actually stated. And in 1917 in Fatima, for those of you who don't know, Fatima was in Portugal. These 3 kids kept seeing this apparition. And it was dressed up in Catholic dogma that it was Mary, but the kids never said it was. When they asked her, where are you from, the entity said and pointed to the sky. The entity appeared in a short dress. It was female, but women at the time wore very long dresses. Only prostitutes wore short dresses. And so-called Mary of the Bible wouldn't be seen dead in something like that. She had this sphere. She communicated with them telepathically. Her lips never moved. She was small, had a pointed chin. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And she gave a prophecy to these kids, many of them which have not really come true, but some of them did. So it gets more complex. The bottom line is the kids went back, and remember, there's this whole uproar in the town. You know, the church is going, oh, it's demons. The mayor's going, throw the kids in jail. I mean, it's this whole crazy thing, 1917. And they finally go, tell the entity to, tell the lady to show us the sign. So the kids go back, they want to see a sign. And so the apparition goes, okay, on October 13th, 1917, there'll be a sign at 12 o'clock noon. So October 13th comes, 1917, and there are about 50 to 70,000 people, depending on who you want to believe, but a whole bunch of people. 50 to 70,000 people are gathered in Fatima. It is raining. You see a sea of umbrellas, lots of black and white photos. The kids are there. The kids are being carried in. There are bankers. There are fishermen. There are farmers. There, the intelligentsia. The press is there. It's basically a cross-section of humanity. The young, the old. Everybody's waiting for the apparition. Right? They're just standing in a field. It's raining cats and dogs, and everybody's waiting for the apparition. Noon comes, no apparition. She's late. Come on. So they're out there in the field. 1 o'clock, somebody goes, there she is. And this orb thing comes in and comes up over the tree. Now, no one sees the apparition but the 3 kids, who immediately drop to their knees, and the apparition begins to communicate. What's interesting is during this time, there was an event that the Catholics, with all due respect, have dubbed the miracle of the sun. I have gone on the record. I have searched and searched and searched. There are photographs. You talk about, taking the evidence. There are photographs of everything but the event. Everything. Before, after, the kids, the umbrella, the kids being carried in, everything. Nothing about the event. Witness after witness after witness say that I looked up and saw a dull silver disc. Remember, folks, it's 1917. The words UFO and flying saucer are not in my lexicon. They're not part of the everyday vernacular. They're not there. And they look up, and 70,000 people's paradigm. They drop to their knees. Everybody's, the end of the world is this, because this thing comes down like this, pendulum-like, hovers over them. All of a sudden, everybody's clothes are dry. This stuff like orange weird stuff comes down on everybody. I mean, it's a really weird deal. But the church gets it and dresses it up in religious overtones, and it becomes Mary. I don't think it was the Virgin Mary, first of all. I think what it was a dull silver disc, which guess who that is? And guess what happened? The point being is, as you'll see here, 50 to 70,000 people, bam, had their paradigm changed. They looked at an event, and they just went with it. They just went with it. No one sort of went up against it. No one tested it. No one challenged it. Everyone just sort of accepted it. And that's the problem. Let's move on. So here we are, Coptic Church. The camera's really jiggly, and then you'll see the apparition. That's how they dress it up. Those are the clothes that they put on. That's real. Night after night after night. And what's really weird is when the thing vanishes, it just sucks in. It goes like that, and it's gone.
Can you repeat what you said during you made a comment.
Sorry about that, Chief. Basically the four orbs that you see there, people just think it's Fatima or Mary of the Bible with the Christ child and Joseph. I mean, it's four orbs of light. Remember, we're told in prophetic literature that these entities who are interdimensional can shapeshift and appear as beings of light. We're told that. 2,000-year-old stuff in what I would term the guidebook of the supernatural. We're told that these entities can shapeshift and appear as light beings. We're told that. That's a 2,000-year-old writing. Let's move on. High strangeness in the lab. I think you guys will find this fascinating. This is the late Dr. Roger Lear, who, by the way, is in all 8 of the Watchers. We dedicated Watchers 8 to him. He passed away in 2014 unexpectedly. It was a real shock to both Richard and I. We used to call him Uncle Roger. I mean, we would go out at lunch together. We were on the trail of this stuff together, and Roger did his last implant removal, which I'll show you in a little bit, last year. And it's the last time I ever saw him was in Seal Lab 2 days later after we extracted the implant. And I'll tell you what he said to me, his last words, and then he passed away several months later, and that was it. So we really miss him, but we dedicated Watchers 8. This man, where we got these fingerprints from, was abducted. And when Roger went there with a team of investigators, they went into the room with a Gauss meter, and the first thing that they did was check the bed. Where the man who had been abducted, on his side of the bed, it was magnetized. Where the wife was, the bed wasn't magnetized. Then they turned off all the lights, put on the UV light, and this is what they saw. And what you'll see is 4-fingered handprints. And this was right next to the window sill, about 3 feet high above the floor, and the window was right next to the bed. And of course, without the fluorescent light, you wouldn't be able to see it. So they paid the owner, and they sawed the drywall out, and we took it to the lab. We took this, and we were able to extract whatever this material is that fluoresces. And by the way, this house where the guy was abducted, there were no children there. So, 4-fingered handprint, it's the handprint the size of a child. I actually put on film, I put my hand next to this hand on top of it, and my hand is like up in here someplace. Much, much larger, and of course my ends of my fingers are not bulbous like this is here. So we have a real problem, Houston, and you can see the fingertips. The exposure was enhanced, but you can see it's a 4-fingered hand. Guess who? And so we're in Seal Lab, and this is the tech that's working. This is a scanning electron microscope. We've taken the sample from over here. We put the sample in a scanning electron microscope with an EDX feature, which you can sort of see on this monitor. An EDX feature, basically what that does is it tells you what the mineral composition, what you're looking at. Is it iron? Is it copper? Is it this? Is it that? And this guy is the tech that works at Seal Lab. He's running all the equipment. So I asked him, and this guy was like a one-word, very, very reticent to talk at all on camera. So I go, hey, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is it safe to say this handprint was not created by a human being? One-word answer, yes. In other words, the minerals that came, the mineral composition that we were able to take and extract from whatever the fluorescent stuff was had nothing to do with human beings at all. The chemical composition was all wrong. And that's what, we took the EDX figure, we throw it in the scanning electron microscope, we go down, the EDX figure is showing, and he goes, ooh, he goes like that, he goes, whoa. And I go, we all go, what do you mean? He goes, well, there's nothing, I should be seeing this, this, and this, and I'm not seeing that. And that's why after, trying to pry the answer out of the guy, I sort of led him with it's a leading question, and I understand that. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is it safe to say this handprint was not created by a human being? One-word answer, yes. Do ancient prophetic texts warn of what is manifesting? These texts are thousands of years old. They are prophecies. This is from Yeshua, 30 AD. men's hearts failing them for fear, and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth, for the powers of heaven shall be shaken. People will be terrified at what they see coming upon the earth, for the powers of heaven will be shaken. Even the elect would be deceived if that were possible. Remember, these are 2,000 years old. This is Josephus, a first century historian. Look right here. For which reason they removed the camp to Hebron. This thing is thousands of years old, and he's talking, Josephus is writing in the first century, but he's talking about hundreds, if not thousands of years earlier. And he says, there were till then left the race of giants who had bodies so large and countenances so entirely different from other men that they were surprising to the sight and terrible to the hearing. The bones of these men are still shown to this very day, unlike to any credible relations of other men. Of course, he's talking about the Nephilim, the progeny of these malevolent intruders, entities, who have sex with the women and create a hybrid being. What does that sound like to you? What's going on with the abduction scenario? What do we hear? You know, what do we hear when the women are taken against their will, they're impregnated, 3 months later, you're re-abducted again, the fetus is taken out from you. You think you've miscarried, but there's nothing there. How does that work? Everybody thinks you're crazy. Then maybe 4 or 5 years later, you're re-abducted again, and you're shown a hybrid child. How many times have we heard that story? And this is high strangeness. This is really, really weird stuff. And people think they're losing their marble. Guess what? The same nonsense was going down thousands of years ago. And we're warned in prophetic text that the same thing would happen before the thing comes to an end, if I could put it that way. The Nephilim, nefarious extraterrestrial entity mating with women of Earth. And that's exactly what they are. They're nefarious extraterrestrial entities who are mating with women on the earth. We know this from the Genesis 6 account, one of the oldest books in the Hebrew Bible, found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, obviously. We also know from the book of Enoch, which was quoted, found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, quoted all through the Tanakh, ancient text, which talks about these entities, these intruders, these nefarious, malevolent entities. And they are extraterrestrials because they don't belong here. Their home is not on this planet. But they're interdimensional, in my opinion. They're not from the Pleiades. And they pop in and they do the unthinkable. And they create this hybrid race of beings, which is kind of what we're seeing today. This is my intellectual property. What I mean by that, I had a lead from Jim Watson, who wrote a book called Mysterious Catalina. I read the book first, and then I called Jim and wanted to interview him. So Jim and I met on the mainland, because he lives out on the island, Catalina Island, at least he did. And I said, Jim, what's going on with this guy, Ralph Glidden? Ralph Glidden was a primitive archaeologist who lived on Catalina, and he was employed by the High Museum in 1919 and 1921. And he basically conducted primitive archaeological digs all over the Channel Islands, from Santa Barbara down to San Diego. So I got wind that this lost cache of Ralph Glidden records was discovered by the curator. And it takes me about 8 months of negotiations with the museum and a hefty $1,000 contribution to the new museum, which I was more than happy to give, to go and have access to the files. When I got there, the files were sanitized. What I mean by that, I'm not looking at a trunk that no one's seen. Archaeologists and anthropologists had poured over everything. Everything was filed and put in museum boxes. Everything. It was a very carefully managed cache of records, but I got access to it. And I'm going in there with a different set of eyes than these guys have. I'm looking for 6 fingers, I'm looking for giants, I'm looking for anomalous skulls. That's what I'm looking for. My first big pay dirt, it was the 3rd photograph I found that evening, was this photograph. The History Channel, I'll show you that clip in a little bit. The History Channel basically dated me for about 2 months before I would go on the air, and 3 contracts later. The first contract was, we have the right to portray you any way we want, even in a negative light. Well, I'm not citing that, thank you very much, sir. And to their credit, the production company at least allowed me to state my paradigm, which of course was completely contradictory to what their paradigm is. But it's their show, it's their nickel, but at least they allowed me to speak. In Ancient Aliens, I got 30 seconds sometimes. Whoop, cut! And it made me, no, it was an extraterrestrial. I didn't say that. That's the kind of nonsense that happened. So here we have Ralph Glidden in a recently excavated tomb here on Catalina Island. Actually, this is either Catalina or San Miguel. I'd have to get the photograph to tell. Glidden, we know, is 5'8". So when I see this photograph, I go, oh my gosh, because I'm looking for giants. And here's why. The scripture that's found in Genesis tells us that the Nephilim were on the earth in those days. What days? Thousands of years ago, okay? But it also says the Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterward, when these nefarious entities from other dimensions came to earth and had sex with the women and created a hybrid being. So there are multiple incursions. Gee, what does that sound like? And it's been going on for centuries. And these guys aren't, let's say, as big as the ones found in Genesis 6, but they're not human, in my opinion. They're not normal. So we took the photograph, and we know we have a definitive unit of measure. We know Glidden is 5'8". There are 3 gentlemen who had computer programs on their computer which could take a photograph, digitize it, and then manipulate everything to see how big. Knowing that Glidden's 5'8", he's able to extrapolate the measurement of this guy, and this is how we did it. Okay, so there's Ralph Glidden. We take Glidden out, we stand them up. We take the skeleton out, we stand them up. We put the 2 together. You'll notice here that it's actually closer to 9 feet. We dumb it down to 8'6". And that's what we're looking at. Folks, this is real stuff. All 3, there was no collusion between any of the researchers. All 3 researchers, remember, no collusion. It's not a blind study, but there's no collusion. You know, they all have the same photograph. I gave them the height of Ralph Glidden. All 3 of them put the skeleton around 9 feet. One of them put it around 9'6", other one around 9'3". This guy was 8'9". So we went with the most non-sensationalistic one we could get, and we dumbed it down even further. I'm a 6-foot man. Add 2.5 feet to me, and add probably 500 pounds to that. That's what we're looking at. They were here. And guess what? Native Americans from Maine to California tell us exactly this. And their stories, their oral tradition, are ignored by the anthropologists and the archaeologists because there's no written language. Read Vine Deloria's Red Earth, White Lies. Unbelievable. I sat down with Chief Joseph Riverwind, who was the Taino war chief, who told me, you know, we've heard stories like this since we were little kids about the red-haired cannibalistic giants who roamed the Americas. But the Smithsonian and everybody, oh, that didn't happen in L.A., it's just a bunch of nonsense. That was all disproven at the turn of the 20th century. It's just a bunch of hokum that sells papers. No, it's not. They didn't even know what they had. They didn't know what they had. And you know what? I went back to the museum. I'm getting a little hot under the collar. Calm down, L.A. Deep breath. I get a little too excited. Blood pressure rising. It's a good thing. So watch this. So that's just another shot of what it might have looked like. And that's only an 8-footer compared to a 5'10" skeleton. So look at this. I go back to Catalina Island 2 weeks ago because we're filming there. And unbeknownst to me, they have a new Ralph Glidden display. The whole museum, when I was there, was devoted to Glidden. Now it's devoted to something else, movie stars of the 30s or 40s or whatever, and they have a small section that they've kept intact for Glidden. What do you notice about the photograph? What's wrong with this picture? And I walk in and I go, you have got to be kidding me. The photograph was deliberately cropped. The photograph was deliberately cropped. I go to the curator and I said, why did you do this? And she goes, well, I didn't do it. This is what I was handed. Isn't that interesting? And she goes, well, you know, the giant's there. And she goes, well, we didn't want to have, you know, all these skeletons showing. And I look around at the rest of the exhibit, and it's nothing but skeletons that Ralph Glidden unearthed. I mean, it's the biggest bunch of hooey I've ever, it was unbelievable. So look at this. So there it is. That's the picture that they show the folks. And you're trying to tell me there's no cover-up? You're trying to tell me that it's not a managed agenda? Are you kidding me? What are they afraid of? Why are they so afraid that they won't let that picture out? You know what the rumor started on the internet? That Ralph Glidden manipulated all these photographs, that he staged the photographs. Okay, straw man argument. If Glidden staged the photographs, why the heck didn't he ever use them? And he never did. No one even knew about these things until I discovered them. No one knew that there was a giant there till I did the science by 3 different people and showed it was a 9-footer. And that's why the History Channel wanted me. Because this is how it happened, I gotta tell you, this is how the game is played. So I go out to Catalina, and I know about the Vieiras, and every now and then there's email. In fact, one of their researchers is the same researcher I use. The guy's name is Micah. So Micah's going, LA, what'd you find out in Catalina? Well, I found some really interesting stuff. So Vieira gets wind of this, and at the time I had no idea Vieira had a production deal with a production company in New York. So I tell him I found some really cool stuff. He says, man, throw me a bone, throw me a bone. So I figure this guy is, okay, right? So I throw him a bone. I throw him this picture. I'll never do that again. Moron that I was, right? The History Channel flies the Vieira brothers out to Catalina Island, and then they're in the archives, and it makes it look like the Vieiras discovered the photograph. Wrong. And when I found out about that before the show was aired, I went public even before my book was released. Told the whole story. It's on my blog. Set the record straight. My intellectual property. And so when they had me on the show, you'll see what they do. We talk about it, and I talk about Nephilim, and they immediately deflect that. Watch what they do. They deflect it, and it's like, no, it's not. It's a Denisovan. And then they show the typical Darwinian model of somehow an ape. That's all. No one knows what a Denisovan looked like. They have a tooth and a couple of fragments of bones, and yet you see this sort of dumb fellow that looks like half ape, half human walking around. How does that work? I mean, if Darwin had known, in my opinion, and some of you may be ardent Darwinists, that's fine, but if Darwin had known about the complexity of the deoxyribonucleic double helix of life, the DNA molecular structure, he would have rescinded his theory. Crick, the co-discoverer of DNA, when he found out what it was, when he sat there and looked at it, and I got a quote from him. Basically, he says, I don't care how many billions of years of prebiotic soup we got here, there's no way this thing just happened by chance. Something happened. So what do? Panspermia. They look to, somehow we were seated here, and it's circular reasoning. Well, where did they come from? Where did this high civilization that created us, how did they evolve? How did evolution work for them? In other words, the deoxyribonucleic DNA double helix of life, double helix, spiral of life, is so complex, it screams of somebody designing this thing. It can't be by chance. And guess what? Guess what? With all the millions of species we have on this planet, we don't see hummingbirds becoming humpback whales. We don't see penguins growing, a long alligator-like tail. Alligators are not growing wings. I mean, everything reproduces according to its kind. I mean, okay, the finch's beak, I get that. Micro, sure, fine. You hit the walnut or whatever the stinking thing is a bunch of times, and your beak's going to get bigger. Okay, I understand that. Just like human beings are evolving on some level, but guess what? You're not creating monkeys, and neither am I. We haven't seen one chimp, despite what the movies do. Somehow, like what's Hercules, whatever the guy's name was. I can't think of the name of the monkey in the movie, but all of a sudden he becomes very human-like. We don't see that. And it's been going on for thousands. Well, it just takes millions of years, LA. Says who? It's a straw man argument. Because it's convenient. No one knows. If you have not seen Ben Stein's movie Expelled, go out and rent that thing. Watch it. It's incredible. And Stein's hysterical. Because he sits down with Richard Dawkins, one of the premier evolutionists of the 20th and 21st century, and he just posed a simple question. Where did the first self-replicating molecule come from? And Dawkins has no answer. And he's kind of fidgeting around. No one knows. And he's very effete. He's like, no one knows. He's very, very English, very uppity. No one knows. How dare you ask me that? I'm Richard Dawkins, you idiots. And so Stein throws him another bone. Well, how could it have happened? And then he gets all happy. Well, I suppose it could have happened something like this. And he basically gives us Star Wars. Long ago in a galaxy far, far away, millions of years ago, there was a race of extraterrestrials who somehow evolved to a high state of evolution by some sort of Darwinian process, who created us in a lab and sent us out on a paper airplane, and here we are. That's all the guy's got. That's all he's got. He's intellectually bankrupt. I don't believe that. I don't. Something else is going on here, but I digress. Whew, what a rabbit trail. So that's what the picture's supposed to look like, and this is what's up on Catalina. Managed agenda, anyone? I mean, are you kidding me? Look at that. Well, we're just going to crop out the parts that we don't want the public to see. Why would they do that? You see, folks, we're not being told the truth. That's the bottom line. We're not being told the truth. We live in a managed agenda. There was a clip I showed, another rabbit trail, but this is pertinent. There was a clip that Conan had on his TV show, Conan the Comedian. And Conan kind of sets the thing up. You guys will find this clip really interesting. And what it is, it shows, I should actually get it and put it in one, and I'll do that, but I'll tell you about it tonight. And what it shows is it shows about 12 to 15 newscasters from all over the country. Local newscasters all over the country. So there's one in San Diego, one in Los Angeles, one in Boston, all over the country, one in Texas, all different, men and women alike. And remember, when you watch the 6 o'clock news, they're all reading off a teleprompter. No one's going out and getting the hard story. It comes off the wire and they read it. And it's on the teleprompter. And whatever's on the teleprompter, that's what they read. That's all it is. So where does the information come from? So we know recently, when this was done, that gas prices fell dramatically, which is another 3-hour conversation because of Russia and the BRICS nations and the devaluation of the currency and trying to move the world currency into the yuan and eliminate the U.S. petrodollar and all this other stuff. Russia exports is the second largest exporter of oil on the planet, so we're dinging them by lowering the price of a dollar, which hurts the Russians. I mean, it's this whole convoluted deal, but that's what's going on. So, you know what we get in America? We get 15 talking heads from all over the country with the same byline, and this is the byline. You don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise. Bam, cut to San Diego. You don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise. Bam, cut to Boston. Different person. You don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise. Bam, San Antonio, Texas. You don't need us to tell you gas prices are back on the rise. And it goes on like this 15 times. And the audience is just totally cracking up. And then Conan kind of goes, whoa, you know, Twilight Zone, Managed Agenda, anyone, 1984? Are you kidding me? Why is it that every single stinking newscaster in America has the same stupid byline? Because it's a managed agenda. It's a managed agenda. In truth, they manage that, and that's okay, it's their show. But all they have is one tooth, and they have no idea what this thing looked like. But they portray it that way, and that's just intellectually dishonest. I mean, you can't do that. You can't say it looked like this because you don't know what it looked like until you get a full skeleton, and even then, you're taking that skeleton and you're putting clay on it, and you're telling the artist, well, I want it to look like this. What if it walked upright? What if it stooped? You see, all that is conjecture. And that's intellectually dishonest. But we look at this stuff when we're taught this nonsense in the schools, and we just, lap it up because we want to get an A in biology or whatever it is. Let's move on. Oh, sorry. This is a skull that we found in an undisclosed location in Peru. I believe we are looking at the remnants of a Nephilim skull. I can't prove that yet. And until we get the DNA from this, we won't know. But I want you to look at this skull and look at this, the way it's headboarded like this. Is that cradle headboarding? Cradle headboarding is when they take an infant, usually under 1 year of age, they put material on the forehead, on the back, and they shape the skull. That usually results in an elongated skull. To do this, he's got no forehead. The forehead, right here, the frontal plate, there is no frontal plate. The frontal plate comes back like this. The zygomatic arch, which we all have, is extremely robust, as is the jaw. Check this out. This is a human skull, and this is what we believe is a non-human skull. Look at the difference. Look at the zygomatic arch. Look at the zygomatic arch. Look at the robust mandible or the jaw. You tell me what we're looking at. You can cradle board artificially, you can elongate skulls. It's done all over the world. But that begs the question, why does some culture get up on a Monday morning and go, hey, Johnny, we're going to make you a cone head today? Why does anyone do that? Why would anyone do that? What are they trying to emulate? And guess what? Elongated skulls are all over the planet. Out on Catalina, I found 2 other pictures, one with a giant 9 feet tall, 6 fingers. Another one with a skull that looked very similar to this. It was more like this shape. It went way back like this. And Ralph Gooden had taken that picture, completely anomalous, and at its feet was another small child with a very long, elongated skull, similar to a skull that we found in Peru thousands of miles away. Guess what? No one knows what happened to these artifacts. They've just disappeared. Last we checked, they were on a boat headed to the High Museum, which was later gobbled up by the Smithsonian, and conveniently the boat sank in the channel, according to the records. This is an elongated skull from Peru. Notice the red hair. This is a replica that we have in our possession. We did a cast of this. Joe Teller from the Mount Blanco Museum cast a skull. So is this, by the way, this skull here has only 1 parietal plate. This skull here had 2. So they're completely different. Look at the suturing. They're somewhat similar. but this skull is larger. And this thing was like one of the largest ones at the Paracas History Museum in Paracas, Peru, which is right on the coast of Peru. And notice the reddish hair. This only had one parietal plate. A normal human skull has a frontal plate, then there's a sagittal suture, which goes from the frontal plate to the back plate, which is called the occipital plate, and then two parietals up on front. Many of these, and this one here, which is why we cast it, only have one parietal plate. Look at the size, look at the volume, look at the size of this skull compared to this skull. Look at the difference in mandibles. Look at the zygomatic arches are similar, but this mandible is very much robust. This was a male, this was a male, but it's two totally different deals. And we are fiending to get permission to get DNA evidence of this one. Actually, of both of them. Both of them are in other locations. We're trying to get the DNA evidence, and once we do, if it comes back the way we think it's going to come back, and preliminary testing has shown, I'll just tell you this, that the late Lloyd Pye, some of you may know him, Star Child skull. He was down in Paracas about 4 years ago, and he took out some small bone samples and gave them to a geneticist, which I have spoken to, Skyped, emailed countless times. And this guy ran mitochondrial, which is the female side, mitochondrial DNA testing on the bone fragments. And he announced to us in an email that whatever the sample is, it's not Neanderthal, it's not Homo sapien sapien, it's not Denisovan, unknown, completely unknown. Brian Forrester unfortunately posted that on his Facebook page, and it went viral. And he got in all sorts of trouble, and so did I, because I posted it on my blog site. And you would think that we, stole Fort Knox. I mean, literally. Oh, it's just bad archaeology. No one looked at the science. No one looked at the DNA. Where's this lab? Who's the geneticist? Who took the sample? Where's the permit for this? It's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I get it. Okay, mea culpa, mea culpa, mea culpa. But come on. I mean, here's a geneticist at a lab that I've spoken to telling us that the mitochondrial DNA is unknown. I mean, why aren't the scientists hopping on the next plane and driving to Paracas? No one cares. No one cares. We're the people that are getting the permits to do the DNA testing. We're close. We're close, but we don't have it yet. This is from 1842, because this debate was raging back in 1842 in academia, where there was, and you say, how does this tie into UFOs? Trust me, I'll get back to that in just a little bit. Something's going on. An outside agency is manipulating the genome. And that's what I'm trying to get at. So I'll tip the punchline now, so you'll bear with me with this stuff. But an outside agency is manipulating the genome, and we've got proof of it. I just showed you the 9-footer, which isn't supposed to be there on Catalina. I just showed you the huge elongated skull that's in Peru. That's not supposed to be there. Early DNA, mitochondrial DNA testing tells us that it's not human. 2 of the DNA tests were done, one from a skull from Bolivia, illegally, from another source, telling us mitochondrial don't know. An English film company went down and took a sample from the skeleton called Waikiki. The head is about this big, the whole thing stands about 3 feet, it's missing 2 ribs, the eye sockets are incredibly large. It was found, abandoned by the Wacarwas, the grave robber. The English took, this UK film crew took small samples, did the testing, the mitochondrial was human from the mother's side, the nuclear, unknown. So we've got anomalies here at best, which points back to my theory that there's an outside agency which is very interested in the human reproduction system. Graham Hancock, in his book, The Supernatural, at the end of all the ayahuasca journeys and everything else, his summation is this: whatever these entities are, all they are is really interested in our reproduction system. It's the same stinking thing that's going on with the abductions and the breeding program. Dr. David Jacobs believes, as I do, that there's a nefarious agenda, a dark agenda associated with this. In his words, it's a replacement program. 1842, this battle is raging in academia. There's one group that says all the elongated skulls are the result of cradle headboarding. Another group is going, wait a minute, not so fast. We get it. Some of these are cradle headboarded. But guess what? Others are not cradle headboarded. And so this whole debate rages. Listen to, and I'll show you the picture in a second. We ourselves have observed the same fact in many mummies of tender age, children of tender age, who, although they had cloths about them, were yet without any vestige or appearance of pressure on the cranium. In other words, there's no cranial manipulation going on here. More still, the same formation of the head presents itself in children yet unborn. And of this truth, we had convincing proof in the sight of a fetus enclosed in the womb of a mummy of a pregnant woman, which she found in a cave 2 leagues from Tarma, which at this moment is in our collection. This is the lithograph from 1842. Basically what they did is they found the mummy. It was a female. They opened up the mummy wrappings. They realized she was pregnant, and they went in. We got to find out what the fetus looks like. And guess what they found? And you can't elongate a skull in a woman's womb. You just can't do it. Last time I checked. So look at the elongated skull. This also has teeth, which is incredibly bizarre. And this is what we found in Peru. And this is what we find elsewhere. It is global. These elongated skulls are everywhere. What does it look, if Georgios Tsoukalos were here, he'd be telling you this is all ET. Remember, there's two paradigms. It's either extraterrestrials who are coming here, or it's some sort of interdimensional being. In my opinion, we're looking at interdimensional beings which are highly nefarious. They can manipulate space, time, and matter in ways that we don't understand, and they have an agenda, and it's not a happy one. It's not a good one. Let's move on. That's what the skull looks like. In Peru, there was a baby skull, elongated, in mummy wrappings. We discovered it in Senior Juan's museum. The first time he went down there, Senior Juan would not let us uncover it. The second time he would. We brought our film crew down. We filmed the whole thing. It's all in Watchers 8. It's also in On the Trail, Volume 1 and Volume 2. And we uncovered it. Joe Taylor of the Mount Blanco Museum spent 4 or 5 hours. Chase Klotsky provided all the gloves and all the forensic tools that we needed to do it. The tapestries on this thing were incredible. The skull is about 2,000 years old. Remember, the Darwinists hold to the Beringian land bridge. At the end of the last ice age, everybody came across the Bering Strait and populated the Americas. That's what they believe. That's what they hold to. This blows it out of the water. Because if that's true, it should have black, dark, coarse hair. What we see is strawberry blonde hair. And it's very fine. And we want to get the hair analyzed. And it's elongated. And there's no way that that's human, in my opinion. Until we get to DNA testing, I'm only speculating. It's only conjecture on my part. But based on everything that I've seen, this was not cradle headboarded. It was not manipulated in any way. That could be what we think is a smoking gun. The red hair. This was in the mummy case right next to this was in the glass case right next to where the skull I just showed you was wrapped in mummy wrappings. They were all in the same case. And when you take the skull out, it still had some of the red hair on. What the Wakaros will do is they'll rob the tombs, and let me just back up here. There's an necropolis about 30 minutes outside of Paracas. It's in this desert area. It looks like the Sahara, but it's been robbed for 500 years. The Wakaros, the tomb robbers, have come in and they pillaged the graves. The Paracas royalty are buried very deep, 25, 30 feet down. But on the top of the surface are the last remnants of the Paracas culture, which, by the way, just show up there about 3,500 years ago. No one knows where they came from. They've got technology, which none of the other, like Inca or Wari or any other civilizations that came after them have. They may have had the wheel, which of course originated in the Middle East. I mean, it's really enigmatic who the Paracas people were. And guess what? They had elongated skulls, and they were buried there. They seem to have had red hair. But get this, when we went to the museum, most of the Wakaros and most museum pieces will take this skull, take off all the hair, boil it, and so it's a nice clean specimen. That's what they do. The specimen I showed you earlier, the big elongated skull that was shellacked next to the human skull, that's what they do to them, okay, for museum pieces. They don't do that in America anymore because of NAGPRA, Native American Grave Protection Repatriation Act, which means that if it's, and I get it, it's somebody's uncle. I mean, I totally get it. I totally get it, and I'm not for that in any way. What I am for is if we hit something like this, that we do DNA testing on it. We find out what the heck it is, and we find out it might not be human. Anyway, some of the red hair was down here. You can actually see some of the strands, and we were able to take some of those strands, and we went into a lab, and we did something called Raman spectroscopy. We had 4 hairs. This is absolutely fascinating. When we saw this, we fell off our chairs. We had a human hair, which is our control sample right here. This is a human hair. We had a dyed human hair. We had the mummy hair here, which is the purple like this. And then this particular researcher, I won't mention his name, happened to have a hybrid hair from a man who was abducted and forced to have sex with a female hybrid being, who had long, stringy, whitish, blondish hair. And when he awakened from his experience, he had the presence of mind to take the hair off of him and put it in the plastic bag. So we've got 4 hairs under Raman spectroscopy. This is startling because the mummy hair is 2,000 years old and the blondish, whitish hybrid hair is in modernity. 10 years old? Watch what happens. Here's the human hair. Comes in, and this is a graph. Raman spectroscopy looks at the molecular structure of what you're examining and puts it on a graph, okay? So here's the human hair right here. It comes up like this, and it goes straight down. The dyed human hair doesn't look anything like the normal human hair. It just comes in way lower and goes straight up like this and out of sight. This is where it's off the rails. Here's the mummy hair, the purple. The light brown is the hybrid hair. Look at the slope, which is what this is. Look at the slope of the lines and how they're almost exactly the same. And when we looked at this, we said to the guy, well, what does this mean? He says, there's a direct correlation to them. One is 2,000 years old, found in Paracas, Peru. The other one is from a man who was forced to have sex with a female hybrid being. Hello? There's an outside agency that's manipulating the gene pool. It did so 2,000 years ago, and it's doing it again today in modernity. I find it absolutely shocking. Absolutely shocking. And guess what? The Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterwards, when these malevolent intruders saw the daughters of men, took them for wives, went into them, had sex with them, and created hybrid beings. That's what we think is going on. It hasn't stopped. It hasn't stopped. And that's why we're so still trying to get the DNA sampling. Listen to what Chris Blake says. Chris Blake was on the History Channel, and we interviewed him because what he talked about was this artifact called the Spear of Destiny, the Spear of Longinus. When Hitler, according to legend, went into Austria, the first thing he did was take the Habsburg jewels, but he took this artifact known as the Spear of Longinus, the spear that allegedly pierced Christ's side. Allegedly. We don't know whether it did or not. It's still at the Habsburg Museum, but guess what? There were actually 3 spears of destiny. The Vatican has one, the Habsburg has one, and somebody else has one. What Chris Blake told us was that his boss, who was in Germany, stole the spear from Hitler and smuggled it into the United States. His boss was a high roller. I've done the research. He told me the guy's name. You wouldn't know him if I said his name now. But heads of states and presidents met with this guy. When he sat down with the History Channel and did the interview, they didn't air it the first season. It was on Brad Metzler's Decoded. They wouldn't air it because they thought it was just a bunch of hooey. So they put a team of investigators to vet Chris Blake's story, and guess what? The second season, they ran with it because they vetted it. And what Chris Blake tells us is amazing. Listen to what he says here.
One of the last things my boss ever said to me before I left, he said, Chris, you ought to write all of this as a novel. It'd make a great novel. And I said, yeah, right, like that could ever happen and ever get published. He goes, I wouldn't have any problem with it. He said, no one's going to believe you.
No one's going to believe it anyway, right. Those who are calling themselves the sons of the Nephilim are in possession of the spear, and they are awaiting their man, the Antichrist, to come forward.
They already know who he is.
What was that?
They already know who he is. They handpicked him, they groomed him, they probably groomed 5 or 10 just to make sure that they...
So you believe he's on the planet now, perhaps?
Yeah.
Did your boss ever mention a timeline where we would begin to see some of the things that we've talked about begin to happen? Are we in that window of time now, in your opinion?
I mean, my boss told me he wouldn't live to see it. He told me that if my life expectancy, I probably would.
That's in Watchers 5, by the way. Chilling stuff. This is Bill's implant extraction, and we're getting close to the end. Thanks for hanging with me. I know we started a little bit late. This is high strangeness in the operating theater. And this is what, look, Dr. Larry used to come to lunch with me, and he'd throw these ridiculous scenarios to me. He'd go, oh, hey, what about the nuns who get pregnant and then kill their babies? That's what he would just, I'd be eating my lunch, and he'd throw this at me. I go, Roger, that's indefensible. What do you want me to say? Hello? I mean, it's indefensible. It's crazy, right? Oh, okay. So, I miss him. I really do. But both Richard and I can do really good Roger Lear impersonations. Anyway, so this is how Bill came to us. Richard, the director and my business partner, moves into a new home, new townhouse, and he has this guy come over to check the smoke alarm. This guy's like 6'8", so he doesn't need a ladder. He just kind of reaches up and goes like this with the smoke alarms. And he goes, well, what do you do? Richard's like in his editing room. He's got all the cameras up and, you know, the edited stuff, and he's working on something. And the guy just blurts, and Richard goes, well, you know, we do shows on the paranormal, on UFOs, and the Shroud of Turin, just all over the map. Oh, really? Oh, I've got an implant. That's what the guy said. What? You know, he goes, oh, yeah, I got an implant. And he tells us his story. He was abducted when he was 5 years old. He fought them off. 40 years later, the implant began to do stuff. He was riding on his bike, and he had this excruciating pain in his leg, his right leg. Felt like somebody took a railroad spike and pounded it through his knee. He ditched his bike. For those of you who are motorcyclists here, you know you don't do that, right? He ditched his bike because the pain was so excruciating, and it went away. About a month later, the same thing happened. At that point, he got an X-ray. 6 months after that or whatever, he finds Richard, and now we've got him. And he agrees to go through the process, which we did with Dr. Roger Lear, which is all on Watchers 7 and Watchers 8. You'll see parts of this here. Basically, we did this. Here's his story. He tells his story on tape. He was abducted. He went right to the ceiling. That's a different physics. You can't do that. I don't care who you are. And they put him on a little 5-year-old boy, and they put him on a table, and he's absolutely terrified, and they implant him. And guess what? There's no intrusion. There's no point of entry wound below the knee where the implant is. We take a Gauss meter. The Gauss meter shows about 8.0 to 8.5 milligauss. On the Gauss meter, it's giving off a magnetic field. Richard's fully charged battery in his camera is 10.0 milligauss. How's that possible? It's giving off a radio frequency of 330 hertz. How's that possible? A STED finder finds it, okay, metallic object. X-ray, yep, there it is, metallic object. CAT scan, yeah, it's there, metallic object. We take him to the surgeon. He takes an ultrasound wand. He squirts a little gel on the guy's leg. He goes like this. Oh yeah, there it is, metallic implant. We'll see you in 2 weeks. We'll take the thing out. No problem. So the day of the operation comes. We got 3 camera crews there. Dr. Roger Lear is assisting. Dr. Matrician is ready to do the operation. We've got about 10 to 15 people in a waiting room watching the whole proceedings on a HD monitor. And for the next hour and 20 minutes, we can't find the implant. It's like it was cloaked. The Gauss meter, flatline. The stud finder goes off all over the place. The ultrasound wand, he's going like this over the guy's little 3-inch by 8-inch strip of flesh over and over and over again. Can't find it. Hour and 20 minutes. I mean, I went in thinking, we'll have this thing out in 20 minutes, we'll all go to lunch, right? No. It's been an hour and 20 minutes. No one finds the implant. It's like the thing is cloaked. It's like it's just vanished. So, at this point, this is what's high strangeness. And this turned Dr. Roger Lear's paradigm. And I'll let him tell you, I'll tell you what he said after the fact. So, we're in the operating theater. There's the implant right there. And one reason why we did this is because the skeptics are going, oh, there's no such thing as implants. Oh, this whole thing's just a bunch of hooey. All these people are delusional. All these people are crazy. Oh, it's this, oh, it's that. Oh, excuse me, no, it's not, sir. It's all on film. When the Gauss meter reads 8.0, it's on film. Here's the X-ray. Here's the CAT scan. Everything is documented. You know, there's other film companies that have done it, but I think we did a great job. It's in Watchers 7 and Watchers 8. And now all of a sudden, it's just crickets out there. No one says anything. What are you going to say? We made this stuff up? What, are you crazy? It's all real. Burgeoning and not going away. So there's the implant. And here we are. Yeah, some of this stuff's a little, okay? We did the incision. But before we found it, before we found the incision, before we found the implant, because we couldn't find it, and he's not about to cut this guy open unless he knows exactly where the implant is. So we can't find it. He's gone over the guy's leg. Okay, so this is the paradigm I operated. All right, I'll tip my hand a little bit to you here. So I get a little tap on the shoulder from not a spirit guide, but the spirit of what I would call the spirit of a living God. A little tap on the shoulder basically says, you need to pray. So I'm in a room full of people that don't believe like I do, and that's fine. I'm not trying to force anything down anybody's throat. I know what I need to do. And so I go, hey, guess what's going to sound a little strange? I'm going to pray and I'm going to do it right now. So I didn't wait for permission. I just launched into it. It wasn't any big thing that you see on Christian TV. Lord Jesus in heaven, we come to... It wasn't anything like that. It was just, Father, if there are forces which are cloaking this device, we pray that you would break their power and do it soon. That's it. That's all I said. That's all I said. Less than 2 minutes later, the object appears like this on the ultrasound monitor. Nothing's there, and it just goes boom, and everybody goes, whoa, what's that? And Matriciana, Dr. Matriciana is freaked. He takes the wand, he keeps putting it on and off and on and off, and he keeps looking at it like, what the heck is wrong? Dr. Lear is like, his eyes are bugging out of his head. And this is what changed his paradigm. I don't know how much, but I took him 2 days later, and I'll get to that in a second. There's the insert. We spread the wound open, the incision open. There's the first shot of the implant, which is encased, by the way, in a material which keeps the body from expunging it. When we took it in the SEAL lab, we had all this stuff analyzed. Now that Dr. Roger Lear has passed away, it's gotten crazy. Everybody wants the implants, and it's just the whole thing. We're actually meeting with Sharon Lear when I get back from this next 14-day road trip I'm about to go on. That's Dr. Roger Lear, Matriciana. There's the implant inside, and that's what it looks like. Oh, let me go back. Sorry. That's what it looks like when it was taken out. And here is what it looked like when it appeared on the ultrasound machine. And everybody was freaked. So we're in the lab, SEAL lab, 2 days later, and I take Roger out into the hallway, and I looked at him and I said, Roger, and I'm not making this up, folks. I'm not making it up. It's in Watcher's Aid. I went on the record. This is what the exchange of the conversation was, okay? I said, Roger, I hope you understand what happened in that operating theater. He looked at me, his eyes got really big, and he said, L.A., I now believe that there's a supernatural, his words, supernatural component to the UFO phenomenon, and I'm going to tell Whitley about it. That's basically the last conversation I had. We went to Peru. We came back from Peru. Roger passed away. Yeah, that's exactly what our feeling was. And that's us in the operating theater. This is a Kronberges UFO, courtesy of Dr. Roger Lear. You'll see the entities in it. Richard Shaw took this and enhanced it and blew it up. And there's a third entity right here that Richard really went after, because something's going on. What it is this time dilation. Again, they're manipulating space, time, and matter and energy. You can see the entity. It's hard to see, but he's in there, and he keeps showing up and moving around within the frame, right in there. And so, look, when Travis Walton, whom I've spoken to and spent time with, when Travis Walton is abducted, we all know the story. I'm not assuming most of us in the room know the story. He figures he's been gone a couple hours. He's gone 5 days. He's gone 5 days. He figures he's been gone a couple hours. There's time dilation. They take them into another dimension. This is why I believe that they're interdimensional. And space-time as we know it does not exist there as we know it. And guess what? Ancient prophetic texts talk of exactly the same type of phenomenon. Look at this, 25% speed. You can see it a little bit better. Look at the Kronberges UFO. This UFO was vetted by the Turkish government. It's the real deal. We vetted the footage. There's absolutely no Photoshop, no manipulation. It's not something on a wire. It went on for hours. There's like 5 hours of film. It's unbelievable. It just goes on and on. It zooms back. When it's daylight, you see it puts on its running lights over the water. I mean, you know, there it is. And, you know, you show it to people and they're like, oh my gosh. And stuff like this, to me, it's some of the best footage I've ever seen, because it really shows you what's going on. So here's something, here's something, and I'm going to close with this. This is ancient prophetic texts, and most of you have heard about this stuff. But the reason why I'm going to close with this is because, like Dr. Jacobs, let me get a slurp. Like Dr. Jacobs, I believe, and Jacques Vallée, I hold to the interdimensional paradigm. And I believe that these entities have a very nefarious agenda. And so in the book of Revelation, which is sort of a sealed book, written almost 2,000 years ago, there are 4 criteria for what is called this mark of the beast. And it's bizarre. The mark of the beast is bizarre. And people would look at this 150 years ago and shrug their shoulders and go, well, we have no idea what this is. Only until modernity have we been able to look at it. He causes both small and great, rich and poor. Who's the he? This figure called the Antichrist. Free and slave to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads. No one may buy or sell except one who has the mark, the name of the beast, the numbers of his name. So that's nuts. I mean, you read this thing 200 years ago and you go, well, it must be metaphor, it must be allegory, because that's, you know, how's that going to work? And now we all know how it's going to work because of the RFID chips. But the RFID chip is not what we're talking about. That's not what it is. Criteria 2, go down here. Anyone who worships the beast in its image or receives a mark on his forehead or his hand will also drink the wine of God's wrath. Whoa, I don't like that. Poured full strength in the cup of his anger, will be tormented with fire or sulfur. Wait a minute. Then back up here. Smoke of their torment goes up forever and ever. They have no rest. Wait a minute. Where's the grace and mercy here? Where's the loving God? I don't understand this. This stinks, and it does. I get it. It stinks. But there's something going on with the mark. There's something going on with the mark that's just bizarre. Because whoever takes the mark, and by the way, if you're implanted, that's not the mark. That's a prototype of the mark. But it's not the mark. And guess what? It was against your will. So it's not what we're not talking about you here. But when they roll this thing out, and they will roll it out at some point, and I'll talk about that right after I get to criteria 3 and 4. So look, criteria 3, in those days men will seek death and not find it. They will desire to die and death will flee from them. Oh, LA, that's just metaphor. Is it really? Do you realize on the Drudge Report last week or 2 weeks ago, there was this whole thing, mankind will live to 1,000 years old. They're already bringing that up, the whole transhumanistic thing. They're already talking about it. Mankind will live forever, disease-free. When they show up, let me get the criteria 4. The lifespan is less than via the implant. Grievous sores will appear on those who take the mark. It says in this prophetic literature, grievous sores will appear on those who take the mark. So whatever this thing is, it's a DNA, in my opinion, it's a DNA changer. It's changing the host DNA. It's doing something to them so that they're not human anymore. It's extending a life period. Let's say you got cancer, all of a sudden you're healed. You take this implant, you're healed. What my theory is this: when they show up, and they will show up at some point, and I mean this. We all know disclosure is coming. We just don't know when. It's going to come. More than likely after some sort of a cataclysmic event, either a super volcano goes off or a nuclear bomb in the Middle East, something like that. They always move in fear, in my opinion. They always try to nurture, if I can use that word, it's the wrong word, but they move in fear. That's why when you're abducted, you're terrified. You're paralyzed, you can't move, your eyes are going like this, you're absolutely terrified. And they come down and lean in your eyes. I mean, the whole thing. I've talked to many different abductees, and some people, what I would call the Stockholm Syndrome, where they've been abducted so much that they now have empathy towards their captors, and that's a real psychological deal. But I've talked to other people who have been abducted, and I've gotten them I've stopped the experience. I've helped them stop the experience. I've been able to do that, and in many different cases. There are other cases where it hasn't worked, because they won't embrace what they need to embrace, but that's another story. The bottom line is, when they show up, they'll have two things. Two things for mankind. Free energy, which completely transforms the world. Yay, it's a new day. The second thing is they will tell us, and what does Darwinism teach us? What does Richard Dawkins say? That we were created by who and where? Panspermia? You see where it's all going? I mean, this whole thing is like, you talk about cosmic conspiracies. Are you kidding me? This is right in line with guys like Dawkins. They'll go out and go, yes, implant me now. I can't wait for my new DNA upgrade. And that's how they'll couch it. The line for this thing will be out the door. Remember, even the elect would be deceived if that were possible. Men faint from fear from what is coming on the earth. Unless those days were shortened, no flesh would survive. These are all ancient prophetic texts which point to this time. Something is coming which is unprecedented. Some people think it's benevolent. Other people remember, we had those 10 people in the beginning who talked about extraterrestrial. Then we went to guys like Kehoe and Jacques Vallée and others who believed it was more interdimensional and linked it back to the supernatural, which is, of course, the paradigm that I embrace. So, Dr. Jacques Vallée, the medical examination to which abductees are said to be subjected, I close with this, often accompanied by sadistic sexual manipulation, is reminiscent of the medieval tales of encounters with demons. It makes no sense in sophisticated or technical framework. Any intelligent being equipped with the scientific marvels that UFOs possess would be in a position to achieve any of these alleged scientific objectives in a shorter time and with fewer risks. There's something else going on here. That's why I brought up the Nephilim. That's why I showed you the skulls, the stuff from Catalina. In my opinion, folks, it's all connected. It's been going on for centuries. They are very interested, as Graham Hancock says, with breeding with us. We're told way back in Genesis 3 that the seed of the serpent will be at enmity with the seed of the woman. That's what we're told in Genesis 3, which basically sets up the rest of the biblical narrative. That has been obfuscated, deliberately obfuscated. You talk about cutting the Ralph Glidden picture in half on Catalina. That has been obfuscated. Most people don't even know what they're talking about. But we see the manifestation of that in Genesis 6, where these intruders from another dimension come and have sex with the women and create this being called the Nephilim. And the prophecy is, it'll be like the days of Noah. And the Nephilim first came in the days of Noah. The late David Flynn made an amazing discovery. These fallen entities, these malevolent entities, first came to earth in the days of Jared, thousands of years ago, and landed on Mount Hermon. Let's say this is Mount Hermon right here. And this is only David Flynn could do this and figure this out. When you go to the other side of the world, 180 degrees opposite, you wind up over here in Roswell, New Mexico. Mount Hermon, where the book of Enoch tells us the 200 watcher angels came and descended in the days of Jared. 1947, Roswell, New Mexico. They're exactly polar opposites of each other. How is that possible? It's deliberate, in my opinion. So, thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Fascinating, excellent presentation. We always love to have questions and answers for you.
Oh, sure.
Okay, so we're going to limit it so it doesn't go on too long, guys. I'll have, let's say, 6 people come up, and then after that, I want you to meet L.A. in the back and his wife. He's brought his books. He's brought the DVDs for the Watcher series. So let's start with some questions. Do we have anybody as the first volunteer? See if this mic's open here. Okay. Oh, he's going to mic it up?
Yeah.
Just a little one?
Can we turn the big spot off?
Can you turn the spot off? Well, we can turn the house lights up. Why don't we do that? Nobody with a question.
This is really nice ambiance. That's good. Better than the glaring thing.
All right, come on. This is the mic, right?
Great, thank you. Yes, thank you for your speech.
This one right
Okay, oh.
Or you're just picking.
All right, thank you. Yes, I'd like to know when that extraction of the implant took place, the one that you witnessed with Dr. Roger Lear, and if it happened a while back. Why has it been analyzed in the lab yet, or it will be?
It was, yeah, that was taken out in 2014, and actually January 4th, 2014, we extracted it. Mm-hmm. It was analyzed, but he passed away, right. And all the stuff is sitting, and that's why we're meeting with Sharon to try to pick up the work. All this stuff costs money, and we funded the whole thing. We funded the operation, we funded the extraction. It was like about $4,000, plus all the x-rays and CAT scans and everything else. We funded it, Richard Shaw and I, basically from our Watcher sales. So we take, we keep the lights on and stuff, but we take the money and we're plowing it back in because the research is ongoing. So I don't have a definitive answer. Dr. Stanton Friedman came up with a great analogy, which I just love. He said that the technology that we're dealing with, it'd be like taking a nuclear submarine and showing it to Columbus. He has no idea what it is, and nor do we. These implants have double-walled carbon nanotubes in them, and we don't know what they do. It's got like, let's say here's the implant. Let's say it's a blow-up. It's got what I would call, for lack of a better word, ganglia. These little like wispy things that come out. We think this is how it interfaces with a human being, but we're not sure. I mean, it's high strangeness. It's absolutely bizarre. But as Dr. Jacobs says, there's an agenda. They've taken an extraordinary amount of time, effort, and money to move this thing forward. That we all can agree on. Some of you may think it's benevolent. I don't. I don't think you take a 5-year-old kid against his will, and certainly against his parents' wishes, and do this. I mean, why not just come down and go, hey, we want some material. Why not just show yourselves? Hey, we're from Zubo, and we're here. We mean you no harm. Nano. I mean, why not be friendly? Why not? No, it's always under the cover of darkness, and people are taken against their will, and many people are just absolutely terrified. Terrified, and who wouldn't be? If you're 5-year-old and little grays come in. But I digress.
Hey, thanks for being here. I mentioned this story on Coast to Coast for Stephen Quayle, and I figured I'd bounce this off you as well. I was about 8, 10 years old, and I was at Comstock, California, like where they had the silver boom in the late 19th century, Comstock lode. And there's an old town. A lot of these places have old towns and old town museums. And I recall walking around this exhibit in the floor, and it was an exhumed, like, skeleton. It was an exposed skeleton, and it was 8 feet 11 inches tall, and it was 6 fingers and it was 6 toes. And it was.
Did you take a photograph of it?
The bottom line is there was no photograph. My parents were kind of bad about that, and we didn't take a photograph. I was wondering, bottom line is, had you ever heard of that exhibit?
I have a whole collection of newspaper articles, letters. All this stuff was around in the 50s and the 60s, and when NAGPRA came in, all of it went away. Much of it went away. There's stuff in Kansas. I chased down one thing. This was like right out of the movie Goonies. It was in a ski town high up in the Rockies, and I get there, and it's, I have a friend of mine who's a private detective, and so he tracked this guy down who owned the building, and I got there, and he allowed me to come in, and we walked down the staircase to the basement, like 20 stairs all the way down, and it's got like lights on string like this, the lights are going, and it's got wood planks on the floor, and I'm going, oh my gosh, I can't believe where I am, and it's like all dusty, and there's wagon wheels and ancient farm machinery. It's just bizarre. And we walk down to the end of the corridor, and there's another flight of stairs which go down. At this point, I can't even believe where I am. I've got pictures of all this. Huge timbers are going up, wood floors. The lights are down there. And we get to the end of this thing, and he goes, there it is. I go, where? And he goes, up there. And there's like a ladder, and there's like a tree fort, which looks like a tree fort. And he says, go up to the top of the ladder and slide the door back. And I'm just like, I can't even believe that I'm doing this. I climb up the ladder, I slide the thing back, and I go, What it was, the floor above it, it was a museum piece, and it used to have glass. So you would look down on this Native American, someone's uncle, and it was all like arrowheads and pottery and all this stuff. So it was Native American, and nothing to do with the Nephilim. So sometimes the trail, unlike Catalina, grows very cold, and it's a red herring. But you gotta, I try to vet as much as I can, but some stuff turns up like Native Americans, and this guy was about 5 foot 10 inches at the most.
Hi, 2 questions. One, does it have to be either or? Could it be some of these things are physical beings from other star systems, and some are malevolent spiritual entities? And you mentioned operating in the shadows. Have some of them, as many researchers believe, whether they're traditional ETs or spiritual entities, have they cooked up secret deals with certain folks in positions of power?
Yeah, they have. I think there's a quid pro quo, which happened in the Book of Enoch, exactly the same thing. In the Book of Enoch, thousands of years ago, there's a quid pro quo. People, these entities come down, they get access to the women, and they show them technology. How much, we've all heard that. Bob Lazar talks about that in Area 51, where here's a sports model. And I believe Lazar. I do. I've talked to Lazar. I believe Lazar. I mean, he hasn't changed his story in decades. It's the same thing. He's been ridiculed and torn apart. I mean, he's not like he's making millions of dollars off this story. He's never changed it. It's the same thing. He's not tap dancing around it. What does he have to lose? I sat down with Dr. Jesse Marcel Jr. before he passed away. One-on-one conversation with him. That's all in the book, Further Evidence. Fascinating interview with Dr. Jesse Marcel. He was there. His father came and brought the artifacts, and they handled the artifacts, and they looked at them, and it was not of this world. And his family was ridiculed for decades, and they never changed the story, and neither did Dr. Jesse Marcel Jr. It's not like this guy's making, a gazillion dollars on some speaking tour. He's not. He's being ridiculed and poked fun at, and his career's in jeopardy, and he never changed his story. Never changed his story, because he knew what he saw. What was the first part?
Why does it have to be?
Okay. If we live in a holographic universe, and when it gets real, I don't pretend to understand the string theory, but when you get down real small, like 10 to the minus 32nd, right? In other words, I can take this, theoretically, I can take this pointer and cut it in half, right? And then I can cut that in half, right? And I can cut that in half, right? And I can keep cutting it in half and cutting it in half and cutting it in half. And I should be able to cut that an infinite amount of times. It turns out when you go down to 10 to the minus 32nd, I believe, which is a really small number, guess what? The object just disappears. And that's not supposed to be. That's not supposed to happen. You should have two of them. You should be able to divide it again, and you can't do it because it disappears. So the string theorists are looking at this thing, and the rabbis have been telling us this stuff for thousands of years, that there's other dimensions overlaid upon each other. If this is a holographic universe, it would explain and offer a real answer as to how these entities can come in and manipulate space, time, matter, and energy, because that's what they do. Because they're working in a different physics, because they're outside of this dimension, they visit this dimension and can manipulate it. And we see it all through ancient prophetic texts, and we see it in modernity with the UFO phenomena. Something to think about. So that's why my business partner, Richard Shaw, truly believes, like you do, that there are good entities out there. I'm not, just show me them. I mean, I want to see a couple of them. I know about the tall whites and all this other stuff, but I'm not buying it. I'm just not buying it. Right.
Yeah, I kind of fall in your camp. You know, after all this investigation I've conducted over these years, I've never met an abductee or contactee that's been bettered for the experience.
No,
you know what I mean? Typically, they end up poorly adjusted. They have post-traumatic stress. They have physical ailments that you know, most of the women don't have children. They have hysterectomies. They have cancers of the reproductive organs. So I haven't met an abductee / contactee that's doing great. You know, that's
I would concur. Everybody I've talked to, when it comes right down to it, I mean, there was this one woman, I won't mention her name. She was an experiencer. She would experience these entities all the time.
Yeah.
You know, voice to skull communication. Go out and we'll be there. And she'd wander out and they'd appear, and she'd see them. And she heard me on Coast to Coast, and she contacted me. And I sent her my books, and I told her precisely what I thought, and she came out of it. She stopped the abductions. She stopped the visitations. And, you know, even afterwards, she could feel them trying to come back, and she would have to, you know, go into a warfare stance and say, no, 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 no.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, we have a question here. Go ahead, Ron.
Yes, do you think there's any connection to the Pleiades cluster underground bases and those reptilian greys and those insectoidoros? And do you think they're here to, like to take cloning materials off of the Earth and stuff, and to, like, take a lot of the Earth resources and stuff?
Yeah, that's the Steven Spielberg, you know, Cowboys Aliens movie, basically. I mean, that's what it is. We've heard that. Zechariah Sitchin and others hold to that paradigm. You know, the whole Sumerian texts, which talk about, you know, the gold and the Anunnaki and all this other stuff. And there are definite similarities between those stories, which are very interesting. But what I see happening is what Graham Hancock would tell us, that these entities are extremely interested. Remember, he's taken ayahuasca for enlightenment, and he pops up, and who does he see? The Greys. He's going, wait a minute, wait a minute. I'll tell you exactly what happened, in my opinion. There are three heavens. The first heaven is Earth. The second heaven is another dimension, which is not ours, okay? Completely different time-space relationship than we have. The third heaven is where the big cheese lives, all right? So these guys live in the second heaven, and they're popped up. So when you take the ayahuasca, you pop up into the second heaven, and that's who you see. And that blew his mind. Now, I've never been able to talk to him about it, and he might not believe it. That's fine. But he sees them. They're there. What the heck are they doing there? I believe I know why they're there. Every shaman, and this is a book I'm working for 2016, every single shaman, whether they're in Australia or in Africa, use some sort of a mind-altering substance to catapult them into the second heaven. The serpent knowledge, you get knowledge from the serpent, the Kundalini serpent. I get all that, but where's the source of it? And is the source benevolent or malevolent? That's the whole ball of wax. But it's in everything from Australia to Africa, and even here in the United States. A shaman will go through, and I've talked to people who were studying to be skinwalkers. I've talked to men who have seen skinwalkers. You know, I've talked to guys who were training to be medicine men, and then, you know, made a left turn or a right turn and got out of it because they realized what it was. There's power there, but it comes with a price. So, you know, what's interesting is, let me just say this. Let me close that by saying this. that this occult paradigm was global. It absolutely was global, and it was there for thousands and thousands of years. And then these two characters, Moses and Aaron, think about this for those of you who've read this stuff. Moses and Aaron, we all know, most of us know the story. Moses and Aaron show up, right? Supposedly the Hebrew God goes, okay, we're going to set the people free. That's just a 3-hour discussion. I wrote about it in the Cosmic Chess Match. It's a long, involved discussion, and it's mind-boggling because you see there's this whole cosmic play happening behind the scenes. But the bottom line is this, just remember this. When Moses and Aaron show up in Pharaoh's court, Moses has got this staff, right? He's walking around with the staff. He goes, okay, throw your staff down, it becomes a serpent. Whoa! So we read this stuff and we go, it's never going to happen. Baloney. He throws the staff down, becomes a serpent. Guess what? The Egyptian magicians do exactly the same thing. There's a worldwide occult paradigm already in place, fully functioning. It's the paradigm that everyone embraces thousands of years ago. And here comes Mo and Aaron walking up. Their serpent, their snake eats the staffs of the Egyptians. We all know the story, but the implications of it are incredible. Where did they get this knowledge from? Where did the magicians that were working for the Egyptians, what are they tapping into? What is the shaman who lived 4,000 years ago tapping into that the skinwalker in the Navajo ranch or the Navajo reservation is tapping into the same thing? And that's what I find so incredibly interesting about all this stuff, because there is a connectivity. Absolutely. And it's fascinating.
That's why we're UPAR's LA. Okay, thank you, Rodney. Okay, we have one more, and come on up, and then you'll be the last, okay?
Okay. I don't know if you saw, there was an article online, and I wish I had more information, but there was this man that was, reminded me of kind of what the picture you had in Catalina, the guy. But there was this man that was standing next to a huge giant femur, and it wasn't skinny like this entity that he found. It was, like a David and Goliath.
Did you see it on the internet?
Huge, yeah. It was huge femur, bigger than this guy.
Yeah.
I mean, he was standing there, and it was like femur went from there to there, and it was like
most of what you see on the internet are hoaxes. And here's something, this is where my conspiratology brain starts to kick in. Why is it all of a sudden that like 2 or 3 or 5 years ago, whenever it was, all these fake pictures of giants show up on the internet? What the heck is that about? You know? And you've seen them. Most of them are hoaxes.
It was a skeleton, you know, with a bone in the ground.
It's Photoshop. It's a hoax. Most of those are hoaxes.
Yeah.
And there's a whole series of them that went around. Giants discovered in Greece. There were, some guy with a big skull and a wheelbarrow. I mean, come on. They're all hoaxes. And most people go, they do some research and they find that it's a hoax. And what that does is it, just like the Shroud of Turin, how many people believe that the Shroud of Turin is a 14th century fake? Right? How many people in the room believe it's a 14th century fake? How many people know, and I've talked to the people who did this, and understand that it's not fake, that the carbon-14 dating was skewed? You want to talk conspiracies? Real quick. There's a protocol when the team went over to look at the Shroud of Turin. The Shroud of Turin is this 13-foot cloth which bears the image of a crucified man. How did it get there? 3-hour discussion. We don't have time for it. But the bottom line is, this crew goes over to take samples from the shroud to carbon date it, because that's going to put the thing to rest, okay? No problem. So they go over there. It's a protocol. We're going to take 3 samples from 3 different parts of the shroud, and a 4th sample was a control sample. They get over there, and these guys in black suits come walking in, shoo everybody out of the room, right? And then 2 or 3 hours later, they allow them to come back, and they go, well, guess what? We're only going to take 1 sample, and it's going to be from this corner of the shroud. Well, but that's not what we decided on, which took 2 years to decide on. But that's what they take. And so it comes back, 14th century, 15th century, the shroud's a forgery, everybody goes home. Not so fast. One guy's living in a monastery, and this woman, and they start talking online. He leaves the monastery, they fall in love, they get married. It's just a wonderful, wonderful story, right? They get married, but they're totally into the shroud, and they're going, something's got to be wrong, something's got to be wrong, something has to be wrong. So they start doing research, and they find out that the 15th century fire, which destroyed part of the shroud, okay, the poor sisters of Clare were experts at something called invisible weaving, where they would end-to-end splice the threads. Are you kidding me? Who has the patience to do this? End-to-end splices, okay? So that they write a paper on it. And they said, maybe this is what mess with the carbon-14 dating. So the scientist who worked on the STIRP team, the Shroud of Turin Research Project, right, goes, oh, I can disprove that in 10 minutes. And he goes down to his lab, he has a little piece of the shroud, puts it under a microscope, and he writes a paper in 2005 before he passes on, which completely changes everything and says, oh my gosh, I looked at it, and guess what? The threads were end to end, and guess what? They were linen, and they were dyed to look, they were cotton, and they were dyed to look like the linen. But it gets better. When Pope John Paul, right, was still alive and he was in his Doherty and he was completely out of it, somehow he gave the approval to clean the shroud. And so they hired this German textile woman, and that's another long discussion which we don't have time for, but she goes in and she steam cleans the shroud and vacuums it and then stretches it. Remember the Catalina photo that was cut in half?
Yeah.
There's no more forensic evidence on the shroud. It's gone. And that's deliberate. That's frickin' deliberate. They do this stuff deliberately. Anything that could point to the supernatural gets vacuumed up or gets cut off in the Catalina Museum. Anything.
Just one more thing. What do you think of the serious mummy?
The serious mummy? Very interesting. When I was down at Jaime Maussan's in Mexico, this is a typical Jaime, right? We get there, we're in our hotel, next morning we get up, we go see Jaime. Jaime's there, he's got this 4-story building, there's people running all around it, the receptionist, there's people buzzing in, buzzing out, there's like this room with all these computers set up, all these young people are in there, showing stuff, and look at this photo, and look at this, it's just an amazing place. Up on the 3rd floor is where the studio is, it's a green room, Jaime's up there, I gotta go record, so he's up on the 3rd floor recording, he takes us into his office. I mean, he doesn't know who we are. He takes us into his office, he goes up behind him, opens the cabinet up and puts down these 2 entities in front of us in formaldehyde, and then leaves the room. And they're real. And guess what? They're guys about this big, and they've got 4 wings. And it's not a hoax. We were there when they came in and they took one of them and did x-rays on him. The thing had 6 implants in it. 6 implants, 6 metallic implants. There were 2 of them. One was in a cigar box, 4 wings, teeth, fangy teeth like this. I mean, the thing, we just pointed ears. I mean, I have pictures of it. I could show you, but I'd get arrested. No, I'm just joking. But I mean, it's like, I call it the winged nightmare. Are you kidding me? And Jaime, he doesn't even know. He says, hey, look at these, and he's got to go up. But we're just sitting there going, you've got to be kidding me. And he told us where he got them.
But this other money is supposed to be elongated head, and it didn't have wings. It was just, perfect little...
Yeah, but that ties back into what he found. There's stuff around this planet, and they don't want us to look at it. And again, for me, there's an outside agency manipulating the genome. There's something going on that's hidden away, and that they don't want us to talk about.
Okay, last question.
Last question. Hi. When you were talking about people being abducted against their will, but you had something that you could help them to stop that from happening. Could you briefly tell us what we could do to have that to stop happening, if it is happening?
Well, this might sound weird, but when I say, look, if there are benevolent entities who are more powerful than these guys, and if you knew who they were, and you could know them, then that's what you would call out. The problem is that religion has obfuscated the supernatural. Religion has put this whole shroud, if I can use that word, over the actual experience. When Yeshua came 2,000 years ago, I'm talking about Jesus here, he manipulated time, space, matter, and energy. If you had leprosy, you were healed without him touching you at the cellular molecular level. How the heck is that possible? But see, what we think of Jesus, we think of this thing, Christian TV, we think of basilicas, we think of religion and confession and guilt trips and all this stuff. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about a God-man who came on the planet, broke every single rule that you can possibly break that we know of. Everything he does. And he's benevolent and he's good. And what I have found, because I come from the occult, I was in the occult, immersed in the occult, I had my third eye open, I studied under gurus, I astral projected, I had spirit guides, I went down that pipe, did the whole deal, okay? And at 30, I had sort of a Saul on the road to Damascus. I just said, look, if you're real, do something, come into my life because it stinks. Everything changed. That's 35 years ago. So when you call out to him, it's not religion. It's not what we're talking about. The Spirit of a living God will come into your life. When you call out to Him, He will come into your life, okay? And things will begin to change. And He's kind, and He's wonderful, and He's good. And guess what? Everything begins to change. And I'm not talking, look, I call the Bible the guidebook to the supernatural, because that's what it is. You know, people go to the Bible and go, ah! When you read it, it's a guidebook to the supernatural, and that's what this whole meeting is about. It's a guidebook to the supernatural. And when a person begins to interface with this God-man, it was 2,000 years ago, it is absolutely astounding what happens. It's been 35 years for me, and I don't belong to a church per se, but I'm a pastor. I don't belong to any denomination, but I'm a pastor, and I've been ordained. But that's what it is. When you call out to Him, look, when I was in the operating room, okay, I said, Father, if there are forces which are cloaking this device, I ask that you would break their power and do it soon. I took authority, because I have the authority, not on my own authority, but in His authority. And I stood in that authority, and I claimed it. And I said, we're not dealing with this crap, basically. You know, break the power. And I said it out loud. And everybody in that room knew that they just experienced something, and they just kind of went, whoa. And the cool thing was, we were asking for like 2 years that, you know, he would show up and do something that Roger would see. We didn't know what that was going to be, and there it was. And it changed Roger's paradigm. I mean, his eyes, L.A., I now believe that there's a supernatural component to the UFO phenomenon. I'm going to tell Whitley. I mean, that's what he said, which is incredible. So that's what it is for me. And the people that I've gotten out of, that's what I counsel them to do. And guess what? They get out of the phenomenon.
I'm L.A. Marzulli, the producer of the Watchmen Chronicles. I'm trying to get the word out about what I believe is the coming great deception. When, not if, the so-called extraterrestrials reveal themselves, what will you do? When this happens, it will change everything. This is why I'm showing the first 40 minutes of the film, UFOs Are Real, for free, to get the information, at least some of it, out to you. I traveled around the country speaking at conferences, and this led me to ask the audiences how many of those sitting there had actually seen a UFO, lights in the sky, had sleep paralysis, or an encounter with some sort of an entity. I was astonished, as upwards of 30% of the people raised their hands. This led to the making of this film. Everyone who comes on the record has had a first-hand experience with the burgeoning UFO phenomena. So sit back and prepare to have your worldview rocked and perhaps your paradigm changed as you listen to their testimonies. In their own words, UFOs are real. Thanks for watching.
My name is Jennifer Ann Marvey, and I saw a UFO.
My name is Terry Staley, and I saw a UFO.
Dad was driving, and he said, "Manuel, look, there's a UFO." And I was looking out the window but couldn't see up, and he was looking up out his side window.
They stopped over the treetops, and it was very weird and made you very uncomfortable.
There's something happening all over the world. What I'm speaking about is the UFO phenomenon. These craft move with impunity throughout all countries on this planet. No one knows really where they come from or what they want. The problem is, there are people sitting in your church right now that have had encounters, that have seen lights in the sky. They're baffled by it. Oftentimes, they're afraid to come forward for fear of ridicule. The purpose of this film is to pull the covers off this dirty little secret that the church refuses to address. Join me as we explore the folks who have had encounters in their own words.
L.A. Marzulli is a sought-after conference speaker. He travels all over the United States and Canada, lecturing and presenting his cutting-edge research to audiences. For this film, Marzulli asks for a show of hands of people who have seen a UFO, lights in the sky, or other unexplained phenomenon.
How many of you have had seen a UFO, sleep paralysis, or an encounter with a being? Just raise your hand. Raise your hand. Keep them up. Hold them up. How many people in this room have had an encounter? Strange lights in the sky, UFOs? Raise your hand, please. Hi. Look around the room. So these, hold them up real high so I can see them. So wow. Look around. Keep them up. Keep them up. Keep them up. Keep them up. Hold them up.
My name is Alan Matthews. I've seen a UFO.
I've seen a UFO.
And I saw a UFO.
I've seen a UFO. And I have seen a UFO.
We saw 3 UFOs, that's what we even called them back then.
I went up to the window and we could see this giant UFO.
And saw 3 or 4 orbs that were up in the sky doing circles and erratic movements up and down in circular motion.
And all of a sudden we see this light in the sky, and I asked my husband, is that a plane? And he said, I don't think so. And so we kept watching it, and it hovered over the treetops, and you could see the flashing lights around it. It was round. See the flashing lights around it, and then you could see the windows and lights in the windows, but you couldn't see inside the windows.
This particular night, we looked over into a field and saw 3 hovering lights.
This thing was huge, and it was, well, I didn't know until I started using the camera, but this thing was moving around and shifting and all kinds of things.
And I was driving that night. It was quite late at night, and I started to see some kind of orange flary lights in the desert. And so I kept looking at them while I was driving. And they seemed to be jumping up and down, and there was no sound of a helicopter or a plane.
And I saw these two balls of light, these orbs, and they were perfectly round, and it was hard because it was dark to get a perspective on how far away they were, but they looked to be about 6 feet in diameter, and they were floating, to me it looked like about 50 feet from my car.
And it kept coming closer, and it was just this green or orange orb with like a red T in it. It kept coming and coming, and then it shot straight west across the Pacific Ocean.
That came forward, it just came out of nowhere, and it was a white light. And then within seconds, another one joined it, above it, and then a third one joined it to the right of it. So they stayed in a triangular shape, and they hovered for a while.
Floated in a way I've never seen anything float. It didn't have a sound. It didn't have, it had no air. You couldn't hear anything like a helicopter's propellers.
My wife said, "Jen, come out here and look at this." And that was actually before it had disappeared. So she watched it too for a few, I suppose, minute or so. And it moved around in different directions.
And the object was like hovering over the trees. It wasn't moving.
It went at an incredible speed, stopped, and then did a turn that would absolutely have been impossible.
As the lights came closer and closer, it struck me that there was no sound whatsoever.
And it had different colors of lights that went all the way around it. It hovered for about 20 minutes as we watched it, and then it went down in between some mountains.
They were just these unusual lights.
It was maybe half a mile, 3/4 of a mile away. It was a triangle, and I could see the clouds going past.
Al, you've had multiple experiences, and some of these experiences were very troubling to you. I want to go back to really the beginning of your life, when you had your first encounter, and what was that like? What were you thinking when you saw this thing?
I was just a young guy. I was out on a hockey rink in Ottawa, middle of winter, with my twin brother and probably about 8 other kids. Beautiful sunny day, not a cloud in the sky. And one of the guys looks up and says, "What's that?" We all stopped and looked up. We saw 3 UFOs, that's what we even called them back then, hovering in formation, like a triangle. The sun was beaming off these things. We looked at them and we're all like mesmerized, going, "What are those?" And all of a sudden, they moved like that in the sky, just darted and then stopped again. Everyone ran into the shack, the changing room, except for me. I stayed out on the middle of the ice and stared at these things, and I said, in my mind, I said, I need to know what these things are. Right after that, I got an angelic feeling. That's the only way I can describe it. Angelic feeling of these things, of warmth and love.
Euphoria?
Euphoria is another word you could use.
What did the craft look like?
They were like disc-shaped objects. They were all exactly the same size, no sound, silver with
dull silver, bright silver?
Bright silver with the sun just beaming off these things, and no sound. It was very spooky. Never seen anything like that.
How close were they to you?
I would say a mile away, because this pollution plant where they were hovering over was a mile away from the rink.
Okay, and they were right over that?
Hovering right over, maybe 100 feet up.
Okay,
yeah.
Wow.
Pretty crazy.
Now, this was the first of many experiences that would follow that.
That's correct.
And I want to sort of cut to the chase here. There was one incident, and it had to do with this woman who basically changed her appearance right in front of you. Tell us about that.
That was mind-blowing. That was in 2008, September. I'll always remember that. I was working for Williams Moving and Storage for their overseas division. We had a container coming in from Kuwait. The lady's name was Diane Kelly. I met her with one of my employees. I brought him along to give a hand. He had heard all my stories. And he didn't diss me. He said, you know, I've heard strange stuff like this. My parents know about it. He didn't make fun of me or anything like that. And anyway, we met this woman. She showed up in her car. I said, hi, I'm Al. This is so-and-so. We're here to unload your container. Welcome to Canada. Shook her hand. And I noticed she was a very pretty lady, well-dressed. She was wearing the weirdest glasses I've ever seen in my life. They were just like off the charts. I'm like,
how so? What do they look like?
They were black and wrapped around, so it would cover the side of her eyes so no sun would get in.
Okay.
So I sort of figured, oh, maybe she has an eye problem or something.
Sure.
But anyway, we moved on from there. The conversation went this way. I said, for some reason, it was September, the rainy season's coming in Vancouver, and I was just making simple conversation. I said, why are you moving from Kuwait? It's so nice over there now, the war's over, and you know, you're coming back here. And she goes, she changed totally. She goes, there's gonna be another war. And for some reason I said, well, don't you believe in a higher power? I don't know why I said that, but that's what I said. And she looked at me and she goes, what do you mean, Al? UFOs? And I'm like, what?
So out of the blue, she just
said that. And I said,
and she still has the dark glasses.
Yes, that's right. I look at my other guy that's working for me, and he just sort of shrugs his shoulders. He heard her. And I go, what do you mean by that? And she goes, we were supposed to meet. I know that you know. And I go, know what? She goes, I know you've been taken by them many times, and so have I.
So let me get this straight. You've never met this woman before?
Not at all.
Not at all. She has no idea who you are.
Exactly.
I mean, she has no idea of not only does she not know who you are, but she has no access to figure out who you are.
Oh, totally. Like nothing.
So she's saying something which completely startles you. Is that a fair?
My jaw dropped.
Okay.
I'm thinking, is she reading my mind? So.
But she looked human.
Totally human.
Totally human, okay.
Totally human.
At this point.
Except for those weird glasses,
okay.
But then
and
again...
And you dismissed that with the eye thing.
That's right. I'm thinking something else, right? But once she did that, I'm thinking, oh my God, here we go again. It's fast forward 2008 now when this happened, and my encounters back east that got very, very disturbing were in 1993 and 94. I got out of Ottawa, drove out from there in 2 days to Vancouver to get away from this stuff, and this is how many years later?
So you were trying to flee the experiences.
They got so traumatic back east, I had to get out of there.
Okay.
Scary, beyond scary. So then this happens, and nothing had happened after I moved out here until I met this lady.
Okay.
So yeah, that was shocking. She would do things like in the elevator going up to the floor where we're storing her furniture, she would whisper in my ear and say, they're listening. I go, who's listening?
They're listening.
They're listening. I go, who's listening? And she goes, them, you know, the Greys. She goes, they're always watching. And I told her...
And you never had her, you never conversed with any of this stuff, and she's coming out and letting you know this.
And starting to spook me and my other assistant.
Sure.
I said to her, I mean, that's just out of the blue to start doing this stuff. I said, look, I'm here to do a job. You're really starting to creep me out. That's the word I had to use.
And that would, I mean, it would creep anybody out. I mean, you would, you know, what's going on here? How do you know, what are you talking about? This woman sounds really crazy, certifiable to say things like this.
I got the job done.
Okay.
What I did do, and I think it's human nature, I gave her my number.
Okay.
Because...
Mistake number one.
Big mistake number one, and it was just like human interest and how do you know this stuff? I need to eventually talk to you more. I gave her my number. As you said, big mistake. She phoned me up about a week later and said, oh, I'm just down the road from your place, because I told her the area where I live. And she goes, why don't you come down for a drink after work? So I said, sure. I'm with my buddy, once again, that met her the first time.
The same guy?
Yes.
Okay.
I said, hey, do you want to come? I'm just going to go home and clean up. And he goes, not a chance. He goes, what are you doing? Stay away from that. I said, no, I got to find out. Just my intuition. I got to find out more about this. He goes, no, I'm not going. I went. And that's when the strangest thing ever happened in my life, and I've had some strange things. I walked into their place, I buzzed up, her friend answered the door. It was her apartment, a beautiful 2-story condo right on the Fraser River, obviously in BC. And they're both out on the deck, and they have these big glasses of wine.
Now, did the friend look normal to you?
Totally normal.
Okay.
And she introduced
no sunglasses?
her. No, just normal.
Okay.
No sunglasses. Right. She introduced her to me, and I could tell they'd been drinking. And I knew, I'm not passing judgment. They're having some fun. And she introduced her friend. We sat down on the deck. She's still wearing those strange glasses. Their glasses of wine are right in front of me on a table. And out of the corner of my eye, I noticed this massive black fly in her wine glass. And it's almost like it was stuck to the glass. It didn't make sense. It wasn't moving, and I pointed it to her. I said, oh, look, there's a big fly in your wine glass. I'll grab some Kleenex and get it for you. She smiled at me and she goes, no, I'll get it. She put her finger in the wine glass. She didn't crush the fly. The fly stuck to her finger, and she put it towards her mouth and went like this. And I just looked at her and I go, holy smokes. I go, if you're hungry, I can make you a sandwich. Why did you do that? And she just smiled again. So that's the starting of how strange this got, and it only got stranger. From there, she took off her glasses. She got on top of me while I was sitting in my chair, and she started lifting up my shirt. And I said, what are you doing? And she goes, oh, how old are you? You're well preserved.
Let me stop you there. So this is not typical behavior for you?
No, not at all.
Okay, so this is something normally you wouldn't allow this?
No, okay. I figured it's because she'd been drinking, but it got a little carried away when she started asking me how old I was. And the glasses were off, as I said. She went to kiss me, and I pushed her away. And her eyes shape-shifted.
Now when you say, what did they look like before? What are they?
Just normal. I don't know if they're brown eyes. They certainly weren't like blue eyes or emerald eyes. I would have noticed that right away. I think they were just normal, darker looking eyes, but the whites were white. When I pushed her back, when she went to kiss me, I pushed her back. Her eyes shape-shifted. The whites went to a golden color with black streaks, and her pupils shrunk. I upset her, and that's what happened. When I pushed her back, her eyes shape-shifted, and I pushed her off me. That was my reaction. And I said, what the heck was that? And she gave me the most evil laugh you've ever heard. And I got the heck out of there.
So you ran out of there?
I ran out of there, and she was chasing me. I'm not telling you anymore.
Did the pupils, were they round pupils, or were they serpentine?
Round.
Okay, round pupils.
Yeah. What I would describe her eyes as, it's like a snake eyes or a reptile's eyes.
Reptile's eyes.
Yeah, with the little black streaks in that.
Okay.
Yeah, it was absolutely shocking.
So you got out of there?
Got out of there.
And then you came to Gordy Tongs, correct?
I talked to a couple of people. Right. My girlfriend first, she said, what are you doing? She trusts me. And I said, yeah, I had to find out more about this. She goes, you stay away from her. And that's when I started waking up to all this stuff. It had to end. It had to end. It had to end. It had to end.
In 1998, I was moving to Colorado, and I was driving through Kansas, which is very flat. It's a plain. My brother's girlfriend was in the passenger seat. My brother was asleep in the back seat. We're driving, it's like 2 o'clock in the morning, and off in the horizon was a large glowing orb, orange. It was smaller than the sun, orange like the sun, but it didn't push out sunlight like the sun would. The light was condensed into a ball, and it looked like it was miles and miles and miles ahead, but it was, pretty big. Not as big as the sun, but pretty big. We stared at it for 20 or 30 minutes, me and the passenger, my brother still being asleep in the back seat. We stared at it, we kept staring at it, we stared at it, and in the blink of an eye, the orb went from miles ahead of us right beside our vehicle and followed us for a good 15 seconds probably. When the orb came beside us, me or the passenger could not say a single word. We both looked over at it. My brother in the back seat even woke up and he looked over at it. and within a few seconds, it was just gone. After it was gone, all three of us, we said nothing to each other. We kind of just stared back at the road and just kept driving. And we ended up going to a rest stop probably an hour and a half later and stopping for a rest. And that's when the conversation got brought up again, like, what did we see? But after it vanished from our eyes, like from the side of the car, we didn't say anything. We weren't even really in awe. It was like no facial expressions. We were just kind of just focused back on driving.
I absolutely think that there's going to be disclosure in one form or another. I'm not certain about what that will be. Number one is, I think we're right on the verge. When I say on the verge, it could happen this year or next year, where the scientific community is going to make an announcement that will reverberate throughout the whole world, where they will essentially say that we now have genetic evidence that planet Earth was seeded by some kind of extraterrestrial race X amount of years ago. I'm absolutely convinced of that, because the theory of evolution is under attack, and this still takes place somewhat under the jurisdiction of the theory of evolution. But the idea is that we were seeded by an extraterrestrial race. And I think an announcement is coming soon.
Well, I certainly think a disclosure is imminent, and not just because I say so, but if you, as you've done many a times, have pointed out, there's all kinds of soft disclosure that's going on.
There's something definitely going on, and there's reports everywhere of sightings of different things.
I'd say, well, why are you then interested in this other subject? Well, because we live in the last days, and these things are going to be revealed.
And so it is, and there are many countries of the world right now that are disclosing, releasing official Ministry of Defense files. Our own Paul Hare, former Defense Minister of Canada, he's been going around Canada and the States involved with disclosure.
And you can go back to the 1980s, and they're talking about it in an imminent kind of a way. In the 1990s, they're talking about it in an imminent kind of way. It's always, we're ready to come. We're almost there.
In terms of disclosure, whether it is like a fallen angel technology disclosure, because I believe that occult technology exists, fallen angel technology exists, or whether it is a psychological, like a Project Bluebeam, where it's some kind of very sophisticated illusion. It would have to be pretty sophisticated. But we're on the verge of something, because we have geneticists saying that we've got the DNA pool of mankind has extraterrestrial DNA in it. We have this convergence of scientific information. So absolutely yes, a disclosure is coming. And with the stuff coming out of the Vatican and other sources, it could happen in a year now, or any month actually.
Dennis's UFO encounter brings a unique perspective to us, as the mysterious object was confirmed by multiple witnesses, all who were professional pilots. Here is his testimony, and it is true.
Dennis, so you're a certified pilot?
I was.
Okay.
I'm retired. I let my medical slip, but I was a professional pilot for about 40 years.
40 years.
And I flew 15, 20 years after that.
And you had an experience while you were flying. Tell me about that.
I did. It was in the early stages of my commercial aviation experience. I was flying from Lima, Peru to Mexico City.
Okay.
And it was about 3 o'clock in the morning, about an hour and a half after takeoff. And
towards Mexico City?
Towards Mexico, from Lima to Mexico. We're at 31,000 feet, and the sky was clear of cloud. We were above cloud, about a quarter moon. And as I was leaving the first officer, I was the second officer. He went back there for crew rest. I was sitting in the front of the co-pilot seat, and the captain hit my left arm and said, "What do we have here, Dennis?" And I looked up, and I saw a very bright light about 40 degrees off our left of our nose, about 10 degrees above the horizon. And very quickly we could discern that it was coming towards us, directly towards us. And this one light turned into two lights, as an automobile does as it comes closer to you. And very quickly it turned into beams of light. And there was a beam that was pointed forward relative to our direction, and pointed backwards, the other one, so fore and aft. And they were angled up above the horizon about 30 degrees, and equal in intensity and length and size. As it stopped beside us, as it came in directly towards us, didn't drift on our windscreen at all, so it was coming directly at us at a very fast speed.
Very high rate. How fast were you going? 500
Well,
miles
we measure in percentage of speed of sound, and we were doing 8.3, I think 8.2,
Okay.
0.82, and which is about 500 miles an hour, yeah.
Okay.
And then basically these beams of light angled down about 30 degrees. The aft one increased in size and length and intensity, and the forward beam shrank to about a third of its size.
Okay.
And then as it stopped very, very beautifully and coordinatedly, these beams of light angled towards almost parallel to the horizon, just maybe 1 or 2 degrees down. And they became equal in size and intensity. The beams were a wispish bluish gray, and they were like cylinders of light, big beams of cylinders light. And as we were both traveling forward, they were formating on us. As we were both traveling forward, there were sparks originating in the front beam as we were traveling along at various points, and then shooting rapidly down the beam. So we hypothesized that it was probably an electric type propulsion system, and this was the exhaust or the photon beams that were going out. I mean, no guessing on that, obviously.
Conjecture.
Conjecture, yeah.
But based on,
Based on what I've seen in the air, as I say, I've flown professionally for 40 years. There's a lot of electrical charges that build up on an aircraft as it flies through opposite charges, and things like St. Elmo's Flyer shows up on the windscreen. And actually, I've seen a beam of electrons out the front of our aircraft, like a narwhal thing. So about 1 foot, 2 feet in diameter, and probably 50 feet out. So it looked like this, looked like electrons to me. So these lights it filled the windscreen by about 27 inches. I reached out my arm, and the beams of light were equal to my thumb, to my thing, about 9 inches, my little finger, and then the other one was the same. The distance between the two lights was about the same length as the lights, these propulsion lights. In between these...
Were the lights actually craft, or was this...
Well, just a minute. All I could see is light, of these two beams of light. Between the lights, there were a row of windows, maybe 18, 20 windows that were rectangular. They weren't round. They were fairly large, and they descended in the center, so it was like a curve in the center. Then there was a distance between the forward window light and the beginning of the beam of light. There was another light just right on top of that. Impossible to tell the size because we didn't know the distance. but the perception we got was that it was very close and probably about the same size as us as it drifted by the left wing.
So it was pacing with you?
It was formation flying, yeah.
Okay.
And for quite a while, it's interesting. All the time I give here is we afterwards discussed and we wrote down how long we thought, because nobody had a stopwatch, the various phases of this sighting took place. So for an example, the time we first saw it to the time it was formating on us we guessed at about 5 seconds. That's all. Now we can see other aircraft that have landing lights on at about 50 miles if they have landing lights on up at that altitude. This was brighter than that, and so I assume that it was further than that. But say 50 miles in 5 seconds, well, you're looking at 36,000 miles an hour.
That's impossible. Let me just ask you something. You are, and because you're a pilot, you are a trained observer. Is that a fair statement?
It is. I was in the military. I was a fighter pilot in the military, interceptor, flew all the jets we had. And so I have had lots of experience intercepting and fighting and playing with other aircraft in the air. So I'm fairly things. And this was with only 18 months after my military career.
And how long did the craft pace the
we figured about 7 minutes.
7 minutes. And then how did it leave the scene?
The beams of light angled down about 30 degrees and increased in intensity, and the thing just shot away.
When you say
up
shot
and away. It just rapidly disappeared. 5 seconds or so and it was gone.
Which is impossible. We don't have anything like that today.
Oh no, it was, it defied the centrifugal force if it was material. So it looked like material from us because the quarter moon that we had was behind us on our right, and we could see light, the moon beam lights reflecting off the fuselage. But we couldn't discern the shape or the edges of it.
I filmed this video out of the window, my living room window of my trailer, and basically I didn't even realize it. I just looked out the window for no apparent reason, just to check on the surroundings outside, and I see this white thing in the sky, and it's brighter than normal. And at first thought, I was like, man, that must be Venus, because you know this is January and it's in the southwestern sky. This is Venus. And it's like, no, it can't be Venus. That thing is huge. So and you're thinking, okay, Venus and Saturn are kind of aligned, like they are kind of right, or they was a few months ago, which makes it bigger. But this thing was huge, and it was, well, I didn't know until I started using the camera, but this thing was moving around and shifting and all kinds of things. So this was on January, I believe, January 22nd of 2009 when I filmed this out my window with just a Canon ZR200, just a mini DV consumer use camera, and I filmed it for probably I don't know 4 minutes, 3 minutes, something like that, and it just very weird looking thing in the sky, and just it would move in and move out, it would shift, and the object has like some type of, you would almost call them like railroad tracks at the top third of the object, and just it would move, it would shift, it would rotate. Then towards the end of the video, it almost looked three-dimensional, and then it almost looked like it was collar bursting and burning with fire. Then it would go back to its normal shape. But basically, I filmed this thing for like 3 minutes 22 seconds, and my cousin had called, which lives approximately maybe 4 or 5 miles from me, asked me if I'm seeing this thing in the sky, and she filmed it too with a handheld VHS-C recorder, and she's like, I've never seen nothing like this before, and I was like, I haven't either. So I just kept on filming. I stopped filming, and then after that is when I got the call. So I went to go out and film again, but it wasn't there.
My name is Jennifer Ann Marvey. I was a freshman in high school. Me and my sister was in a chapter called Future Homemakers of America, which was a chapter for all girls. We was at a Halloween party at our high school, and we had some girls with us that were in a foster home that was not able to attend unless they had a way to and from the party. So my sister offered to do that, and there was 12 of us in the car. As we was dropping the girls off, it got down to where there was just 6 of us girls. 3 of the 6 were girls that were in current foster care. As we were taking them home, we was in the Appalachian area of Hocking Hills, and we had saw lights, and they were saying it was probably just a truck, someone mud running. And I was telling them that, you know, they weren't familiar with the area, and there was no roads there, that it couldn't be a truck, that was a lot of trees, and on top of the trees we seen, you know, a shape and light, almost like running lights. And we stopped to look at whatever this was, and they were saying it was a truck, and I explained to them, and then they finally realized that it was trees, and the object was like hovering over the trees. It wasn't moving, and that there was multiple lights. And we got scared, and I told my sister, who was driving, I said, you need to just go. And she was speeding. I remember her speeding, but it was like we weren't moving. And as we finally got to the house to drop the foster girls off, the foster mother came out and was cursing us and said that we were hours late. And as I looked at my watch, there was no way that we were hours late, because we had left the school approximately 30-40 minutes prior to that and already had dropped off 6 girls. But according to the mother, we were hours late, and she was irate. And we all, to this day, have talked about these memories, and we know that we seen a UFO or something that was not ordinary, and we all now are in our 30s and 40s and still all remember this. And that was what I believe to be a UFO.
My name is Randy Clark, and about 1965, I was in a little town in Indiana, and playing music with a friend of mine. Came out of his place, went to put my equipment away, and I heard a strange sound like being close to a power plant. And I looked at the back of my car. I thought there was some sort of electronic thing going wrong, or electric in those days. And then I went to put my amp in the trunk, and I thought maybe that the trunk light was shorting out. And I turned around and looked, and right over the street, at telephone pole high, was this silver sort of a, I guess for a lack of a better name, a cigar-shaped craft, no wings. And it was just very slowly moving at a very slow speed like this. And it had 3 lights on it, light in the front, and 2 lights on the side that were amber colored. And I took off running towards my friend's house because it, quite frankly, scared me. And that fight thing, it happens real fast. So anyway, hit his door and hollered at him, and he came running out, big-eyed, all because he had 2 children. He thought something happened to them, because I was extremely excited. We got out in the front yard. I pointed to the sky, and by this time it was to the would have been a little west of his house, right just out in front of it, about the corner of his house. He had the same experience. He went to take off and run, and I grabbed him, because I realized it was going away from us. And it just kept going down the street till it got to the end of the street. The craft was probably about 40 feet long, maybe, if about like that probably. And probably about, I would think, about 16 to 20 feet wide. Anyway, it got down to the end of the street, and it bobbled like this and made absolutely no noise and just disappeared. I mean so fast that you could blink and it wouldn't be there. But there was no propulsion, no noise, nothing. It just disappeared.
My name is Terry Staley, and I saw a UFO
Well, when I was 12 years old, I was babysitting for the doctor next door, and I came out about, it was probably about 10 in the evening, and I was walking across the driveway to my grandmother's house, and I looked up in the sky, and there was a formation of probably, I'd say about 12 of them. There was, maybe 3 or 4 across, and then the rest of them tailed behind. And the doctor saw me looking up in the sky, and so she walked out, and she looked up, and then my mother and grandmother walked out, and they saw, and then we watched them for a little while. They were all flying in a formation. And then we saw an airplane come through and saw it flashing red and green, and the minute that the airplane came close to these things, they just all scattered.
You've heard and seen a lot of first-hand stories from a variety of witnesses who have seen UFOs up close, and their testimony's true. But there's lots more to come, as you've seen less than half of the film, as in their own words, UFOs Are Real, is 1 hour and 37 minutes in length. We know for a fact that UFO sightings have reached an all-time high. Can disclosure of the so-called extraterrestrial or ET presence be far off? You can arm yourself with what the producer of this film believes is vital information. You'll want to see and hear Al Matthews' closing remarks as he weighs in from first-hand knowledge of who and what these beings actually may be. You'll hear from 2 whistleblowers who claim to have been in deep underground military bases, and what they encountered there was not from this world. You'll also hear a deathbed confession from Colonel Hill, who claimed to be present at the 1947 Roswell, New Mexico UFO crash. Colonel Hill told our witnesses that what came down was not a weather balloon. There's so much more, and you can watch the rest of the film right now by going to our Vimeo channel, The Watchmen Chronicles, and purchasing the film for only $9.99. Or, if you're a collector, you can purchase the DVD for only $19.99 by going to our website, www.lamarzulli.net.
An act of pure evil. It was just a kill box. Concert goers amid barrage of bullets raced to escape. At least 59 dead, 527 hurt in Las Vegas festival shooting. This is insightful. City is victim of a crazed lunatic full of hate, and there are others like that. Adolf Schickel Gruber, Hitler was one, and the little guy in North Korea is another one. Watch out when he starts dropping more bombs. Let's stand up to him. Packed hospitals just stopping the dying. They're packed just to take care of the bodies that are falling there because of this one nut that's in hell right now. I'm going to prove that. List of mass shootings in the U.S. history, a long one. Many places. But the worst in the history of the United States of America was just created by this demonically controlled human being. That's all you can say about him. And all the damage that he did. And his family, you must know how they feel. An asteroid just fell on top of our family. Of course, his dad was like that, and as the father, so is the son in many cases. I'm going to get into this now in just a few minutes, and I'm going to let it go because I'm going to preach the Bible. All Scripture is given by inspiration of God and is profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for correction in righteousness, that the man of God may be perfect, truly furnished unto good works. You're going to hear God speaking. because he wrote this book. Holy men of God spake as they were moved by the Holy Spirit. Every word was written by the Holy Spirit. And you'll hear about it. And by the way, you know who those holy men were? All Jews. What? 64 of the 66 books were written by Jews. Only Luke and Acts was written by a Gentile. It's a Jewish Bible, and some of you are so anti-Semitic. So let me tell you, on May the 14th, this coming 2018, I'm going to wish the Jewish people a great holiday as they celebrate the fact that they've come back and have their own nation again after 2,500 years. I'm going to tell you something. It's the greatest sign that Jesus Christ is about to appear, and he's going to take care of all these murderers and everything else when he arrives. Remember the date, May 14th, and make sure you're listening. I am planning to have this thing in every nation on earth. Praise God. The Holy Spirit talked to me, and he said, that's your job, the entire world. And I thank God for this network here I'm on and what they're doing and letting me do it. Amen. I postponed the program I had for this week about my life story, which you'll hear soon, because I had to get here and answer what God's holy word, written by the Holy Spirit of God, third member of the Trinity, every single word from Genesis to Revelation, and he makes no mistakes. So you listen carefully to what he says, because we've got 1,600 false, damnable cults that teach every filthy heresy against the Word of God because of their holy books, and they're not holy books. It's a disaster. Thy word is truth, and I believe it. These preachers don't have enough backbone to take a chiropractic adjustment. God forgive them. I'm not one of them. I'm going to speak every word like God wants me to speak it under the power of the Holy Ghost. You shall receive power after the Holy Spirit's come upon you. And I have a renewed mind after 4 years of being in hospital beds. And I'm going to use every ounce of power the Holy Spirit places in this body to preach it like it is until God calls me home, regardless any price I have to pay. I'll probably never walk properly again. I've had to be in wheelchairs, everything imaginable. Right now I can't get by without much of a cane, and I don't know if I ever will. But I will drag myself to this desk till my last breath, till Jesus calls me home to get the word to you. Now let's see what the book says. The book. 2 Timothy 4, beginning with verse 2. Preach the word. Be instant in season, out of season. Reprove, rebuke, exhort with all long suffering and doctrine. For the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but they'll heap to themselves teachers, having itching ears. They want their ears tickled, and they shall turn away from the truth and shall be turned unto fables. And the Word of God says they'll even go further. They will listen to doctrines of demons. Yeah, that's in there. 1 Timothy 4, verse 1. Let me give you an example. There's a guy by the name of Judge Rutherford. And he started the Jehovah's Witness movement. No, they got all the truth. Forget Jesus. Forget the Holy Spirit. There's Jehovah only. Bunk! My Bible says there's Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, and these three are one. I believe God. Now let me how I can prove that that's true, all right? Who created the world? In the beginning, God created the world. But that's not all. Proverbs 30, verse 4. Who has created all the ends of the earth? What's God's name? Jehovah. What's his son's name? Back then it was the Word, John 1:1, but it became Jesus. So get to that in a moment. Jesus helped him create the world. That's what it says. What's God's name? What's his son's name? And his son's name at that time, because he hadn't come to earth to die for sinners, was not Jesus. It was the Word, W-O-R-D. John 1:1. In the beginning was the Word. And the Word was with God. And the Word was God. By him were all things created that are in heaven and earth, visible and invisible, whether it be thrones, dominions, principalities, or powers. All things were created by Christ and for Christ. Now do you believe it? And the Holy Spirit moved upon the face of the waters, upon the sea and earth, because he was given dominion over overseeing the earth. A Trinity. Now, I don't care what Judge Rutherford said. I don't care what Jehovah's Witnesses say. I heard one the other day, and he says, "Oh, God's a God of love. Nobody will be in hell." What? 120 times I found hell in this book. Hell without hell. Have you looked at the terms? Look them up in this book. Put in hell, and you'll get big verse after verse after verse after verse. Then there's Hades and Gehenna, the two Greek words for hell. Hades is the local jail. You get in trouble, you get in the local jail. Then you're brought out for the trial. Gehenna is the final penitentiary where people are paying a price for the sins they did. And now it's degrees of suffering. Romans 2:5. After thy impenitent heart, you treasure up unto yourselves wrath against the wrath of God and the righteous judgment of the Lord. Come on, get one of these and punch the word hell in there. Punch lake of fire in there. And you'll come to my agreement that Judge Rutherford didn't know his Bible very well, and you got a bunch of witnesses believe it all. I believe God. Let God be true, and every man liar. But there are hundreds, 1,600 different cults, and they're teaching every blasphemy there is. Doctrines of demons, as I already said. Please forgive me, but I want to come back to Judge Rutherford, who started the Jehovah's Witness movement. And this Jehovah's Witness on the radio who said the God of love would never send anyone to hell, so there is no such place. Matthew 25:41. This is God speaking. Depart from me, you cursed, into everlasting fire prepared for the devil and his angels. Good enough? No, it's terrible to be lost. But I'm going to tell you, this guy that just did all this murder and all this killing, all this slaughter, all this heartache. Are you listening carefully now? I've got news for you. Not good news, but it's God's news, written by the Holy Spirit of God. And that's in Luke chapter 16, beginning with verse 19 to 26. There was a certain rich man, clothed in purple and fine linen, and fared sumptuously every day. And there was a beggar named Lazarus laid at his gate, full of sores, and desiring to be fed with the crumbs from the rich man's table. And instead the dogs came like the sores. Now, the rich man dies, not because he was rich, but because he hated God. The rich man died and was buried, and in hell he lifted up his eyes in torments, saying, Father Abraham, have mercy on me and send Lazarus that he may dip the tip of his finger and cool my tongue, for I'm tormented in this flame. Abraham said, Son, between us and you there's a great gulf fixed, so that they which pass from hence to you cannot, neither can they pass to us from you. What does that mean? Once you're dead, it's over. And you wake up in hell, it's over. The only time anyone will ever come out of hell is to be transferred from Hades, the local jail, and transferred to the final penitentiary, and there'll never be a release. Suffering forever and forever. And this guy that just done all this damage to so many people, may he burn in hell forever. Does God forgive sin? Yes. All of sin comes short of the glory of God. And he does forgive sin. Come unto me, all you that labor and are heavy laden. I'll give you rest, but they were heavy laden because of their sin. This guy was a maniac, a lunatic. He hated everybody. And so in hell, he's going to lift up his eyes, and he's going to cry with all the other hell-bound sinners. And even some of these religious people that are killing. And cry for a trickle of water. And the Bema seat's going to take place, and there are 5 different crowns. Christian, are you going to have one? Have you been taking a stand? You mealy-mouthed preachers, you're afraid to preach on hell? God help you, because Christianity, the magazine Billy Graham started, just had an article, order a book immediately. That's 7 out of every 10 Protestant preachers are dealing with pornography. Look at these women and committing sin as they look at those pictures. No wonder you're afraid to preach on hell. You're afraid you might end up there. Repent! Acts 2:38. Turn around! Or you may end up with the guy from Las Vegas. And I'm sorry to say this, but USA Today just covered what's going on in the Church of Rome. 3 full pages, but I'm happy to say I get the Vatican magazine, and they're saying the same thing. They're saying, get rid of these priests that are raping these little children. And then standing before the priest on Saturday as he forgives sin. And they have to think of him as Jesus. And then they've been raped during the week by him. I'm not picking on them. Thank God for Pope John Paul II, my hero. I loved him. And for Pope Benedict, the great theologian of the Catholic Church. But the cardinals are complaining because of a Jesuit pope. The Bible says the last one. And if I had time, I'd prove that the Bible teaches, and history does, that he is that one. And he will reign supremely with the world dictator of the New World Order. And he's making inroads now to do what Rick Warren, our own Protestant guy, is doing. Let's join together, Muslims and Christians. Pope Francis, yeah. He's been around there in the various countries. Why? Because the final world church will be united against the true God and against the true Bible. God help, I don't want to be around, but thank God Jesus is about to return. I'm going to show you why it's right at the door, and what I just told you is part of the great sign. Tell others. That's only a few months away. Tell them all about this media where you're hearing me. You're going to read about all this in the headlines soon. Now, some of you have done wrong. Does the artery of sin? Yeah, not the blasphemous thing this godless man just did. The man controlled by demon spirits. But all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. And if you ask for forgiveness and mean it, say, I won't do it anymore, Lord, he'll cleanse you. The blood of Jesus Christ, God's Son, cleanseth from all sin. I don't care what you've done. If you say, Lord, I'm sorry. Jesus, I see you on that cross. That blood was shed to save me and will cleanse me. Come into my heart today. I receive you. Please, Jesus, save me. And the Bible says, whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord Jesus Christ shall be saved. No hell, heaven forever, absent from the body, present with the Lord. Do it right now with me while we pray. Father, we've had a terrible tragedy in our country. We pray for all these precious people who've lost their lovers and have funerals all this next week. We cry for them. Wow. What heartache. All because of one vicious, demonically controlled human being. Comfort their hearts, please, God. And for anyone who's ever done anything that they feel is unforgivable, the wages of sin is death. Romans 6:23. And that's also the second death, the lake of fire. Lord Jesus, I receive you now. Forgive me, cleanse me. I want to open my eyes someday with you in heaven. You're coming soon. I want to be taken up to be with you then. In Jesus' name I pray these things. Amen.